Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We've got about 1 minute to 10, so I would like to start. So could we take our seats, please? Okay. Good morning to everybody today. Just like to welcome, particularly people from our shadow board who are here observing today. Thank you very much for coming along. I hope you enjoy the experience, and also we're very interested in your views. So any observations that you've got at the end, please come up and have a word with me if you would like to. Also to welcome two of our governors here today. That's very good. I should also welcome Eloise. I can't pronounce. I'm terrible with names. Eloise from CQC, who I believe is observing us today. You are very welcome. And I should also say that this is a board meeting in public, so I am aware that members of the media, members of the public can observe this board, as is only right, and we welcome questions from members of the public and all those that we serve. We haven't received any questions in advance, but that doesn't mean to say that as we proceed, people can ask questions. I encourage them to do so. I have no apologies other than Sarah, who's not here today, our Chief People Officer, but I'm very pleased to welcome Tina, who is deputising. Welcome to see you here. Could I go on to the next item, which is declarations of interest? All members' declarations are published. Are there any other declarations that people want to alert us to today? Unless I hear not. Okay, that's fine. Can I go on then to the minutes of the February meeting? Are they a true and accurate record? Thank you, Peter, for doing that. Any comments?
No, it was
for the April meeting, which was only 4 weeks ago. So any observations on those, please? No, I can assume that they are agreed. And then could I go on to the action log very quickly, Peter? Anything there that you want to bring to our attention?
No, Chair, there are 4 actions actually from the last meeting that are being picked up by the relevant board committee, as stated.
Okay, thank you. So we go on to the substantive agenda. I just wanted to, in my role as chair, we go on to my chair report, which I hope you can take as read. But I just want to broadly set the scene for today's discussions. So I think we all recognise that our North Star, our guiding principle, is very much that we are here to deliver the best for patients. That's what we are about, and that we will always continue to do that. As a board, we also have responsibility to taxpayers to make sure that we use public money in the best possible way. And in the current context, we know that the public finances are particularly challenged. Next week, the Chancellor will announce to Parliament the outcome of the comprehensive spending review. The government is committed to at least maintaining and increasing the level of resource within allocated to the National Health Service, but we know there are significant challenges. We also know that the government is encouraging us to be as productive as we can in all that we do. To members of the public, I just want to say, as a board, we really understand the need to improve productivity and efficiency, but we don't do that at the expense of patient care. That's not what the government is saying, and that's not what we're saying. We are very much focused on patient care. At the next board meeting in public, when we will have 3 months of data for the current financial year, we will be focusing very much on productivity and efficiency and how we are moving the organisation forward in that way. But if I return to today, all that I've spoken about, the best possible patient care, improving productivity, making sure that we engage with our patients, and ultimately that we achieve the best health outcomes for the South East within our region. It ultimately depends on our people. I think we would all recognise that within CCAM we have an incredible workforce that is highly committed, and as a board, I and my colleagues take very seriously the importance of having a culture, a way of working that supports our people to deliver of their best. So, what you'll see in the agenda today is a whole series of papers that talk about and give some direction of travel for what we are trying to do to create CCAM to be the best place to work. So, what I hope we get out of today's discussion is the board is very committed and understands the way forward so that we can be confident that this is the best place to work for all the paramedics, all the support staff that we have within the organisation. And this is a deliberate, what can I call it? It's a deep dive into a whole range of people issues where we want to be assured that we are doing the best we can. So hopefully that sets the tone for the remainder of the discussion. Of course, we're going to focus on quality. Of course, we're going to focus on finance. But this is very much a board today that is focused on CCAM people. That's all I wanted to say at this point in time. I will take my report more generally as read. The only other probable thing I should say is that we have two new non-executives who will be joining the board at the end of June. These were appointed by our governors quite recently, and I look forward to working with them in the future. But I think that's all I want to say at this point, and I'll hand over to Simon as Chief Executive to give his report.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for that, Michael. So can I start by also extending my welcome to our new shadow board members. As I said, it's nice to see the seats looking fuller. So I believe joining us this morning, you can wave if you feel so moved. Tony, there you are, Tony. Aid, Simon, Barbara, Harris, Bradley, Sim, Hannah and Alex, so welcome. This is a really important development for us as an organisation because part of, as I say in my report, part of us making CCAM a great place to work is, as my report said, our ability, our willingness to engage in hearing different voices. And so I'm really grateful for you for your agreeing to serve on the board. Our commitment to you as a board is that we want, and I would say we need to hear from you, because some of the challenges that we are going to be grappling with, they're not necessarily challenges of our making, and those challenges are not going to go away. But how we solve them, it's critical that we take our people with us. You'll hear about some of those challenges today, the financial challenge, the performance challenge, how we reconcile those. So we are really keen to work with you to hear your ideas, your input into how we shape our response to those challenges. And we genuinely believe as a board that by engaging with you, our answers will be better, they will be fuller, and they will command more confidence. So thank you. I'm not entirely sure you knew what you were signing up for when you did it, but I'm very glad that you did. The second thing to draw out from my report, I think, is, and I'm really glad to see both Andrew and Lee in the audience, is we're going to deliberately focus today in our framing about people on our volunteers. So the first thing I wanted to say in that space, again, I relish the opportunity to do this, but is to thank our volunteers for all that they do in their communities, for their communities, and to help us deliver the service that we do. We had recently our volunteer conference. It was a fantastic day. Thanks to Danny, who's also joining us in the audience, for his work and his team's work in putting on what I thought was a great day. I just draw your attention to, I think, one of the most impactful moments for me during that day, and it was Jackie as our chief paramedic that led it, which is that under paragraph 13, where we had for the first time awards on the presentations to do with the return of spontaneous, our ROSC awards. It was great, wasn't it, Jackie? And we had people in that room stand up who had materially saved lives for people, members of the public that we serve. And if there was a more impactful moment about the difference that volunteers would make, I would struggle to describe it. It was amazing. And so it gives us an opportunity to say thank you. We are fortunate, hopefully, that Helen Vine will join us in a little while to present the report, and our team will then respond to it. But I wanted to say that the spirit in which I approach that discussion is we already have an amazing resource in our volunteers. How do we take this report and do better, do more going forward? Because we know that with the demand coming towards us, that's coming, daily, we can only do what we do if they do what they do, and we need to do more together, more in partnership. But an opportunity to say to all of our volunteers today via Lee and Andrew, thank you for all that you do, and I look forward to that discussion in a little while. Returning to the theme of productivity a little bit, productivity is not just about what we do on the front line. There is a real question for us to ask, are we making sure that with all the resources that we have available, we are getting to patients as fast as we possibly can with the most expert and the most balanced use of our resources. It's not just about that. Part of my report also refers to the work that we're doing with South Central Ambulance Service, where, again, you would expect us to do this in the current climate. We need to look at every opportunity we've got to combine services to do things that can be done better once across the patch. So just for the board to note that exec-to-exec meetings have continued. We had a recent board-to-board last week. These discussions were positive. They were positive not only from the point of view of the two organisations talking together, but the wraparound that we had from our commissioners, who are very supportive of this work, who themselves obviously are now going through significant changes. And that offers us a significant opportunity to work together to offer something better. Key date for people to hold in their head is that work is going to go on over the summer, and I expect by October, early October, that we will be reporting back about here is the plan for what we're going to do. Only two things to say in that, really. The first is we absolutely recognise our joint responsibilities to protect and indeed improve the frontline offer that we make to patients. That is not, nor will that ever be, under threat. We also want to say we recognise that there are significant opportunities for us to do things better together, and we shouldn't be shy about doing those things, in part because we know that that will help us protect that frontline offer. A couple more things to highlight. The first, I think, the Medicines Distribution Centre, I think I have touched upon this in relatively recent meetings, but particular appreciation to Shani Korb and her team, who did a fantastic job in getting us a facility that we can genuinely be proud of, and for those who have not been there, had the opportunity to go and see it, I would encourage a visit. They're very delighted to show people around. And again, it's one of those opportunities to pay a tribute to something that we don't always see, but 50,000 medicine pouches each year as a result of the work that they do. We could not do what they do without, we couldn't do what we do without their input, so my thanks to them. And finally today, in the spirit of wider engagement and competitive spirit, although I was away on annual leave, I particularly wanted to thank Janine and the comms team for what I know was a hugely successful football event, and glad to see everybody survived. I'm told it demonstrates team spirit, inclusivity and organisational pride. I'm sure not a little competitiveness too, which I was also glad to see. I am going next week to Thanet to present them with their award for winning, and I just wanted to say that for me, the fact that 400 people come together shows the community that is CCAM, and something that we can and should feel really proud about. We've got a lot to get through today, so I will stop there, but I'm very... Sorry? Yes, thank you for reminding me. I should not pass by today, because obviously we learned recently of the sad passing of the founder of paramedicine, modern paramedicine, I think, Professor Douglas Chamberlain. I had the privilege of meeting Douglas early in my tenure. Others will be able to describe him far more fully than I can, but to say he was a man who had paramedicine at his core, and who I think pretty much single-handedly had created and invented the modern paramedicine profession. It feels important as a board that we pay tribute to him and honour his legacy. His funeral, which some of us are attending, will take place on the 20th of June, and I and some others will be representing CCAM at that event. I can't capture what he meant other than to say, even late on in his life when I met him, his energy, his enthusiasm, his vision for paramedicine, his absolute belief in what all of you in this room, particularly sitting down that end of the room, do on a day-to-day basis, remained absolutely undimmed. And that passion that drove his life, I think, is something that is worthy of honour. So as our lead paramedic in the room, I wanted to invite Jackie to offer her reflections too before I close. So Jackie, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, we, as a profession, absolutely will miss Douglas. It all started for us with an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest that Douglas attended. He was impressed by the response of the ambulance men, as they were at the time, but he felt that we could do better. We could equip the ambulance men with more equipment and more skills. It wasn't an easy road. Not everyone was up for this. He was a very, very tenacious man. His North Star was making it better for patients, and that's one of the legacies that he leaves for us as paramedics, a legacy of a North Star of doing good things for patients always, with good professional standards, but also a bit of a sort of tenacity for innovation. So we will miss him greatly, and we're so proud of the legacy that he leaves us.
We intend to honour Douglas's legacy at our awards this year. We think it is right and proper that somebody who has made such a contribution to shaping the modern paramedic landscape is reflected in our awards. So I know that we will talk about that in due course, but an award in the space that Jackie's described around clinical excellence, I think, feels an entirely appropriate way that we can continue to honour his legacy. So with that, Michael, I will end my comments and happy to take any questions.
Thanks. Thank you, Simon. May I open the floor? Are there any questions that people would like to ask of Simon? Please, Liz.
Thanks, Simon. I'd just like to say I also attended the Volunteers Conference, and it was one of the most uplifting, motivational days I think I have ever attended. The speakers were great, and it was just such an opportunity to meet our volunteers and to understand the difference they make to our local communities and how they are very much embedded as part of our immediate response to our patients, and quite often they are the first responders, literally. So thank you from me to all our volunteers and to Danny and the team who put on the conference.
Thank you, Liz. That was very nicely said. Thank you. Any other question? No? Okay. Thank you, Simon. That was, and thank you for all that you do. Can I move on? Next item, which is the board effectiveness review. And Peter, would you like to introduce that?
Thanks, Chair. So in the pack for board members is a paper that summarises the outputs of the annual board effectiveness review that we undertook over the two last sessions, both in March and in May. And one of the purposes for this is, apart from needing to do it, is to ensure the board is effective as it can be to meet the challenges that Simon and yourself, Chair, have mentioned just now. I think, certainly from my perspective, and I think this was reflected at the session we had last, the review helped to reinforce the many strengths of this board, which is, consistent with the model outlined by the Insightful Board, and also, as set out in the paper, areas for further development. Just to name those 4 areas, so it's how the board can become more resilient, how it uses challenge to promote the very best discussion possible, how it becomes more connected, and how it leads a more inclusive culture. Some of these themes are in throughout today's agenda. Aligned to these, also in the pack, are the agreed we will statements, and this will help to ensure, as part of the output of the assessment, ongoing reflection by the board and its committees. The outputs of the committee reviews that was part of the session 2 will help to shape their approach and focus for the coming year. Should just say that our Appointments and Remuneration Committee, one of our statutory committees, is omitted from the paper, wasn't deliberate. We did touch on this committee too, and have since developed some objectives which would include greater emphasis on succession planning for board roles, and we'll ensure that through reports by ARC and the other committees that we include a section that come to this board meeting that sets out how the committees are meeting those objectives. Should also say too that that includes Charitable Funds Committee that was also omitted, particularly now we have the new head of charity who I think is observing the meeting today. A couple more things. So the assessment and the actions we take over the coming months will be considered as part of the external world-led review. So we're required to do, as all providers are, an external world-led review every 3 years. We're going to do it slightly ahead of time, given the timing of exiting RSP earlier in this year. So we'll use the outputs of this to inform that later in this calendar year. So lastly, Chair, just asking the board to collectively accept the outcome of the effectiveness review and commit to championing the we will statements, which we'll, as I say, return to at future board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for the reference to the Charity Committee. I can see Victoria, our new head of charity, is observing. So welcome, Victoria. Have great support from us for the skills that you're bringing to the organisation. I just want to stop for 1 minute because this effectiveness review is really important. The board is at the centre of the governance of the organisation. We need to reflect that the next 12 months are going to be particularly difficult given all the changes that are underway. And I just briefly wanted to check with each chair of the committee that they happy where they are in terms of the resources they've got and how they're operating effectively. So, Max, any comment you'd like to make? You're head of the People Committee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really welcome the report and the We Will statements, particularly around recognition, language and curiosity. We're starting to already bake it into the business of the People Committee, and I think we're well resourced to take forward that programme of work.
Okay, thank you for that. Paul, please, as Chair of Finance and Investment.
Yep, similar to Max, we're very supportive of the report. We're looking forward to the 2 non-execs joining us, because that's going to help a lot. But I must say, over the last few months, the quality and the depth of our papers has been brilliant, excellent, really. So I think we're in a good place. We have all the resources to deliver as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. And Liz, would you like to?
So on behalf of QPSC, I think we also welcome this report and the review. I think we've been working towards the We Will statements. It will be great to have them embedded within our committees. I think also with the addition of Jackie as Chief Paramedic now joining QPSC, I think we are well resourced to cover the requirements of that committee and deliver for our patients. So thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And Howard.
Thank you. Yes. Yep. We also accept the outcome of the review as being very, very positive. I'm looking forward in my new role as chair of the audit committee to addressing some of the issues. Obviously, we have the benefit of the independent internal audit and external audit to feed into our committee as well. But yeah, we're very, very happy. I think we're in the process of finalising our cycle of business, which is really critical to the committee. But yeah, very happy. Thanks.
And the final person I just want to give a view is Karen as Senior Independent Director. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Michael, and to Peter for pulling together the content of quite long and deliberative sessions so succinctly for us. We very much appreciate that. I'm comparatively new to the board, almost a year now, and I think what's impressed me throughout this whole process is that we've been given proper time to sit together and really think about how we might learn from some of the things that have come out of the reviews. And I think that's been very helpful. And I particularly welcome the We Will statements, which I think can provide the useful basis for some metrics that we can then measure going forward. So I think it's a very helpful springboard into the next year. Like others, I've very much welcomed the way that the executive have taken some of the suggestions that have been made about the papers, and there has been a huge shift in those in the last year. Particularly welcome the increasing use of statistical process control and a thicker narrative coming with it, so that to answer, as you'll see today, the so what question in terms of the significance of what we're actually looking at. So thank you for everyone that's been involved in all of that. I think the only final thing I'd add to that is when we did talk together between the chairs, I think there's a recognition that not all topics sit quite neatly into one committee, and we may be looking at those across different frames. So things like health and safety, for example, each committee may look at with a slightly different view. So we're quite keen that we try and keep a hold on that and get a look at these issues in the round and things don't get lost. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. And the one observation that I would make, when I joined CCAM quite some time ago now, what I was impressed with is the way the audit committee is configured. So each chair of the various subcommittees of the board do sit on the audit committee with the senior independent director. That is quite unique in my world, because it gives a good cross trust perspective, and it enables governance to draw out wider systemic issues, and I think that's very positive. I'll conclude this item, but I should also say thank you to the governors, because I know a number of governors consistently observe the operation of the subcommittee, give valuable feedback, so we are very grateful for that. Peter, I think from the conversation I've heard, you can take it that the review is approved, and thank you for the work that you did on this. We don't sit still. We know we are an organisation that continues to improve, and we will continue to reflect and adapt and be agile in the way in which our governance continues to mature. But thank you. Could I now move on to the next item, which, Jackie, it's the board story. So over to you, please.
Thank you very much. So this week is National Volunteers Week. We have some of our wonderful volunteers in the room with us today. So a lovely opportunity for us to acknowledge and celebrate the work that they do and the contribution that they make to our patients here at CCAM. We have over 400 volunteers. We're very lucky with the number of volunteers that we have. And last year, our CFRs responded to over 3,000 Category 1 calls. That's a significant proportion of our Category 1 calls, and very frequently they get there before the attending ambulance resource. And when they get there before an ambulance resource, they get there significantly quicker, so a number of minutes, about 6 minutes on average. And that's a really, really important period of time when you're in cardiac arrest. It can be the difference between survival or not surviving. So they do absolutely incredible work. And we've got a video to share today which highlights that impact with a patient story. We'll hear the incredible work of one of our CFR team leaders, Lance French. This event happened on Easter Sunday last year. He was dispatched to Margaret Monks, who had a collapse at a family dinner. And I'll leave Margaret and Lance to share you through the video.
I think it is good for the soul when you see that you've made a difference to someone else's life. It is a good feeling, and I think sometimes we forget that. I've been a community first responder for 7 years now. I went to a recruitment workshop and realised that was something I'd like to find out a bit more of. I then went on to the meetings and met the teams, and then I decided that was something I wanted to do. So we're quite remote here, and I feel it's a good opportunity for us to be able to give the care to people before the ambulance gets there. I mean, that is as simple as that. I just think it's a needed resource.
Well, just a nice sunny Easter Sunday, and I'd been working in the garden prior to us going up to the pub for a nice Sunday lunch. And then just coming towards the end of my lunch, I said to my husband, I don't feel all that good. Could you get me a glass of water? And I don't really remember very much after that, except I was lying full on the floor, and this very nice gentleman was telling me that I was all right. And that I later learned that that was Lance, the volunteer responder in our area.
It did come in as a category 1. I thought I was going to an arrest in a local pub. I knew that was likely to be quite a stressful environment. She was unconscious. She did have some breathing, but it was quite shallow. She was unresponsive. So to be able to help in a small way before the ambulance could get there to help her and her family and the other people in the pub who'd witnessed it, which is not something that really you need to see, was very rewarding for me.
Generally felt quite safe because the people around me was telling me that I was all right. And I do remember when the ambulance crew came in that Lance was passing over to them and telling them sort of various things. But I felt safe with the people around me. I wasn't panicked in any way. The young girl that was in the ambulance, I don't remember how the conversation came up, but she just said, oh yes, Lance is the volunteer in the area and we see quite a lot of him and he comes out quite regularly to us. And being a volunteer myself, I was quite interested, you know, that somebody did that kind of work. I mean, much more noble than what I do, because obviously, you know, you've got to be qualified to do that sort of thing. So it sort of stayed with me a little bit that it was a volunteer that had helped.
So it was lovely to see her looking so well under better circumstances than when we first met. It's always nice to see someone who has made a recovery, even because quite often we don't get to know anything about any of our patients or clients. We go along, we do our job, we hand them over, and we don't hear any more about it. And I don't mind that, that's okay, because you can't take all of this with you all the time. But it is nice on occasions like this when you do find out they've had a great recovery, and that is good.
Well, I'm quite impressed the fact that people have got that quite kind of qualification and that ability that they do it on a voluntary basis. And it was an Easter Sunday, it was a holiday weekend, 4 o'clock on a nice sunny afternoon, that people will actually turn out voluntary and do that. Most people do very important jobs and get very highly paid for them. But the fact that people are prepared to do that on a voluntary basis, I think it has to be recognised.
I think our trust is quite progressive. I think we have a bigger scope of practice than some of the other trusts. We do quite a range of calls to patients, from some hand-holding and some non-injury falls right up to the most serious. All of those are valuable and they're all good as a volunteer. I think in the future volunteers will have to play a bigger part of localised healthcare, particularly immediate intervention, which will help save lives. I think the benefit I see as a CFR is the speed of which we can get to a patient, and that does make a difference.
Thank you very much to both Lance and Margaret for being willing to tell their story. It's a very, very important story and well put across, and it brings home the significant contribution that our community and volunteers make. I was opening it up for a few reflections. I know we're going to go into the review of volunteers shortly, but I think it's worthwhile just stopping and reflecting on that. And I got one question, Jackie, and Margaret may be able to answer that. Lance made a point that, well, I don't often know what happens to patients. Now, I know that's incredibly difficult, and we get information about what impact we have. Is there a way in which we communicate more generally back to our volunteers about the impact that they're having?
So we are able to feedback in some circumstances, but the majority of circumstances we're not able to. There's that's an issue for our employed staff as well. What we are able to do is provide feedback where a CFR has attended a cardiac arrest and we've had a ROSC or a survival. So we are able to notify where those events have taken place. But in terms of further feedback, it's not quite as straightforward, unfortunately, because the information governance and the information chains don't allow us to do that at the moment.
But thank you for that. Any other reflections people would like to? Liz, I mean, you went to the volunteers, and I know you've been a champion of the way in which we engage with our patients, and the volunteers are another way of engaging, aren't they? About understanding, what are the practical difficulties sometimes.
And I think it's that significant impact of having our volunteers, and we've looked at CFRs, but another big area is our chaplains who support both our workforce and our patients. But I think these volunteers are embedded within our local communities, and we aren't always directly into those communities. And I think, as on the story, he's in a very small rural community that sometimes we struggle to get to as rapidly as we'd like to. So they are integral to our patients surviving. And as we go through Helen's report, I think, and Jen discussed it at the conference, the rapidness of the response to get hands on chest is outstanding, and we save more patient lives. I think at the conference, we all stood up to see how many lives actually had been saved. And I'd just like to say CCAM has the best cardiac arrest outcomes out of all of our ambulance trusts in England. And that's partly to do with our volunteers and their rapid response. So I think we have this amazing cohort of individuals as part of our team that are integral to the service we deliver to our patients.
Thank you, very, very well said. Simon, you want to...
First thing, I'd just like to welcome some of our CFRs who are joining us online. Hopefully you'll enjoy the conversation when we get to the report. And I know Helen has now joined us too, so can I just extend my welcome to Helen. Just building on the point that Liz has made, and board colleagues will recall the models of care conversation we had at the last board report. And Dan Cody, sitting over there, presented the fact that we are the best ambulance trust for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest survival rates in the country. And about 300 people are alive today because of that. Our aspiration, obviously, has to be to do better. And to do better, we're going to need to work with our volunteers to further do more in our communities. And the other point I wanted to draw out in that space is that we know our ability, our community's access to defibrillators is differential. It is probably one of the key planks of health inequalities that we need to address going forward. So reaching into communities that already we serve and continuing to build on that, but particularly in this year, focusing on communities who don't yet have access to public access defibrillators, I think is a key challenge for us. So I just wanted to add that point to a debate, and I know Helen will talk about that in due course, but it's important for the board to think about those things. It's not just about the individual patient, this is also about the whole population health. And we've invited, obviously, our teams who are leading some of those models of care to come back and talk about that development later on this year. But Lance also talked about the fact that he attends people who fall, so I would ask the board to think about how during this winter are we going to respond better to people who've fallen. These are some of the people who wait the longest for a response, and our volunteers have a critical role to play in that regard too. So much to celebrate as we go into this for sure, but also I think a lot more that we can continue to do.
Simon, thank you for that. Just as an action point, I know later in the year we do, as ever, consider our readiness for the winter. And perhaps we could reflect on the point that you made about, how we are supporting our local communities going forward. So we could take that as an action. But thank you for that observation and suggestion, Simon. I too would like to welcome Helen from ACE, but before we get into your report, I think Danny and Jen are going to introduce this item, please.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm really excited to be here today and to be joined by both Danny Dixon, who is our Head of Community Resilience, and Helen Vine from AACE, as you outlined, Michael. And it's great to have the context given by Lance and Margaret's story so that we can really kind of make tangible the impact that volunteering has on our patients. And as we heard at the conference, also on our staff, feel very supported and integrated with our CFRs, and that's something that we're working to further enhance. To your point about winter resilience, we're looking to really bring our volunteering resilience together with our normal response. So that's really, really relevant. So the papers that we've got today, first, I'm going to ask Danny to just give us a little bit of context about the volunteering function at CCAM at the moment. And then we're going to hear from Helen, who's presenting the report that she's undertaken on our behalf into how we could go even further with volunteering at CCAM and how we might approach developing a strategy for the future of volunteering, and with very many thanks to Helen for all the work that she's done on that and the contributions that everyone has made. And then I'm going to just summarise the paper that's also here with us to apprise the board of how we're responding to Helen's report and how we plan to, we've outlined the actions we've already taken to strengthen support to our volunteers in the short term, but also how we're approaching the engagement and the development of a future volunteering strategy for our organisation. So there are 3 elements to it.
Thank you, Jen. And Daniel, welcome. Very pleased that you're here today. So over to you, please.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairperson, members of the board, volunteers, colleagues, and members of the public. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today. And as we've heard, the timing of the board is somewhat serendipitous, as it is National Volunteers Week, so it's really important that we continue recognising those efforts and commitment of volunteers around the country, but specifically within CCAM. And then I'm going to add my thanks to those that we've heard already, to all of our volunteers across the Trust. It's your commitment and the commitment of the advocates that support you that allow volunteering to flourish in CCAM. Frankly, I think you're all amazing. Last year in 2024, as we heard, volunteers contributed around 100,000 hours of service to CCAM, and that's a figure which is absolutely meaningless because the organisation doesn't exist to give volunteers an opportunity to do something with their time, but it does exist to save lives and to serve the community. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to spend a few moments to share with you some of the things that volunteers have done during those 100,000 hours and the impact that this has had on our patients, our people, and our partners. So firstly, volunteers save lives. In 2024, our CCAM Community First Responders, or CFRs, attended over 3,000 Category 1 calls, and as we've heard, the average time difference between a CFR arriving on scene and the next clinical resource was around 6.5 minutes. For patients in cardiac arrest, every minute that defibrillation is delayed reduces their probability of survival by around 10%. So what this means in reality is that for any of those 3,000 patients who were in cardiac arrest and survived, it is more likely than not that this was due to the presence of a CFR. And this contributed to CCAM having those highest cardiac arrest survival rates that we've heard about, over 2% above the national average. Secondly, our volunteers have saved time. So throughout 2024, where a patient had fallen and a CFR was available locally, they arrived roughly 1 hour before subsequent crews. And that allows for earlier assessment, reassurance, and intervention. It means that concealed injuries can be escalated for an earlier response. Patients can be made comfortable and, where safe, supported up from the floor, and the risk of post-fall complications, which can develop in as little as 30 minutes, are significantly reduced. We also know that for every hour a patient remains untreated on the floor, the risk of hospital conveyance increases by 10%. And that highlights the third benefit, that they save us money. In a health service which is increasingly and rightly focused on cost efficiencies, interventions which prevent complications and reduce the need for hospital conveyance offer a significant cost saving, both for the ambulance service and for the wider healthcare system. And we're further developing our approach this year to use our volunteers to respond to more falls patients and hopefully reduce the number of ambulances that need to be dispatched. So that leaves us a cost saving of over £400 for every incident. And in a service that responds to over 30,000 patients who have fallen annually, that has significant potential. It is important to highlight that whilst having volunteers is financially efficient, it's not free. Ensuring that we have the appropriate leadership, infrastructure and support to facilitate volunteering within the Trust is the only way that we will truly realise the potential that our volunteers have to offer. And some of the discussions today are to focus on how we can achieve that within these current operating constraints. But it's precisely because of those constraints that volunteers can no longer be considered a nice to have. And instead, from NHS England, volunteers are crucial to the NHS vision for the future of health and social care as partners with our skilled staff, not as substitutes for them. And that focuses on our patient-facing, but also our non-patient-facing volunteer opportunities and how we can improve and enhance those. So to finish, Sherry Anderson once said, volunteers don't get paid, not because they're worthless, but because they are priceless. And I'd like us to keep that in mind today as we hear from Helen and Jen. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. I really like that final observation about priceless. I think that is very well said, so thank you. You raise a number of points, which perhaps, if you didn't mind, we would now hear from Helen and then be part of the wider discussion after that. So, Helen, welcome. Thank you for sparing the time today, and thank you for doing this excellent report. Would you like to introduce and give us your perspective, please? Has been shared. Thank you.
The leadership infrastructure at the time of the review, which started in November and reported in March, it was very clear that the infrastructure didn't provide the stability and the capacity which would be required as a foundation for future development of volunteering activity, and in fact to sustain the current activity. Simon referenced this a little bit earlier in his comment about health inequalities. The existing funding and finance models within CCAM and, in fact, within many other trusts could be perpetuating health inequalities within your communities. So expecting local communities to fundraise to provide equipment and uniform for a community-based volunteering community first responder service means that those communities that are socio-economically deprived or do not have the wherewithal to raise those funds are unable to develop those volunteering opportunities. And those communities, in the context of cardiac arrest particularly, are those where there are fewer public access defibrillators, a lower educational attainment and therefore understanding of cardiac arrest, so less ability to recognise it and less propensity to carry out bystander CPR. So you've got, if you like, a perfect storm in terms of perpetuation of health inequalities within those communities. What I also identified and stress in the report is that it's absolutely fundamental to agree, collect and share robust metrics evidencing the impact of volunteering. No request for funding or finance will ever be approved unless there is a strong business case for the investment. And consistently collecting that data is a really important step in proving the impact that volunteering has. And you've heard lots of data already in the short presentations that you've had around volunteering this morning. Next slide, please. But to continue the key findings, it's fair to say that communication with volunteers was fairly haphazard and scattergun. So an effective communications within an overall volunteering strategy will actually support the trust to address the tensions that I mentioned at the beginning that exist between volunteer expectations and trust, and what the trust and the community needs. There is actually a fantastic platform here for the trust to get the basics right around supporting volunteers, around integrating them and the community resilience function into the new divisional structure. Community resilience and volunteering in some cases was quite siloed, so providing enabling support from wider trust functions will give a much broader reach around volunteering. Volunteers, as we've also heard already, can offer non-clinical and clinical activities, and there are opportunities to lift and shift proven ambulance sector volunteering roles from other trusts within into CCAM. And with a sustainably funded leadership infrastructure, so there are a lot of secondments, temporary, short-term, fixed-term contracts, that kind of thing, with an agreed sustainable funding settlement for leadership. The development of a community and resilience and volunteering strategy, alongside that robust evidence base, what you will have at CCAM is a volunteering population which will be able to support implementation of the trust strategy over the next 4 to 5 years. Next slide, please. The review makes quite a few recommendations, 62 actually, for the short, medium and long term. What I can say is some of those have already been implemented, but the early priorities most definitely needed to be review and rationalisation of the various communication platforms and then development of an effective communication strategy, which will really help to address those tensions and also make sure that everybody is clear about the expectations and the impact of volunteering for communities and your patients. Focusing on collecting an agreed set of metrics which give robust data in respect of trust strategic aims and how those are linked to the impact of volunteering. Agreement about funding for volunteering. As we heard, volunteers offer their time for free, but volunteering isn't without cost. And that should ideally cover at least the duration of the trust strategy. And the implementation of a volunteer and community resilience hub, which is a way of providing strategic volunteering leadership across the whole of the divisional structure. So currently you have clinical volunteers, you have chaplaincy volunteers, but there's also opportunity for other roles across health inequalities, community engagement and welfare support within the organisation as a minimum. Thank you. Next slide, please. So there are some opportunities for quick wins and some longer term work that can be addressed within the volunteering space. But there are also lots of support mechanisms that already exist within the ambulance sector. So there are some packages that ACE has developed in conjunction with volunteering teams across the UK that can be swiftly implemented within your trust. So volunteering policy guidelines, for instance, that we know comply with the appropriate legislation because we've had support to check those against NHS England guidance. Volunteering reward and recognition framework, which was part of the feedback from the volunteers. And I know you've already started to do through your conference and activities there. The National Volunteering Dashboard, which I know you now contribute to, and your data is displayed on the ACE website alongside other trusts showing the impact of volunteering locally and nationally. And there is an emergency planning, resilience and response framework for volunteers, which has been developed nationally, which you could implement and therefore enable you to utilise the expertise of volunteers in alternative roles during times of business continuity, major incident or crisis. There is a national volunteering lead based at ACE, who is Jo Crook, who I know is engaged with your teams. And there's also a support offer available from the National Ambulance Service Responder Managers Group. And I just wanted to flag, actually, in the context of winter preparedness, they have recently produced a very short brief about how volunteers can support in the winter of 2025-26. And that's based on learning from last year's response to winter in the context of volunteers. As I said before, there are plenty of examples across the UK where volunteer roles have been tested and proved to be impactful. So North East Ambulance Service have community ambassador volunteers who are doing great work in the space of building connections with communities that we have so far struggled to reach and addressing health inequalities within those communities. And the Welsh Ambulance Service have another clinical volunteering role, which is called Community Welfare Support Volunteer, slightly different from Community First Responder. And that's making a significant contribution, particularly to patients who have fallen, for example, which you've also already outlined this morning. You have an opportunity to create a clear line of sight between your strategic objectives and how volunteers can contribute to that. Therefore, again, reducing the tension between their expectation and the trust requirements, clearly outlining what the impact of that volunteering offer could be. You've got an ambitious target to increase out-of-hospital cardiac arrest survival rates by 5%, given that you're already performing above the national average. And it's really clear, and you've outlined today, how volunteers can contribute to that goal. Also, volunteers obviously can contribute to reduction in avoidable conveyance through responding to lower category calls and also patients who have fallen. And as I've already outlined, increasing outreach to marginalised and underserved communities and supporting your work around community engagement and reduction of health inequalities. I think that was actually the last slide. So I'm happy to hand back to you, Chair, but happy, of course, to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, Helen, thank you very much for your report. Incredible what you've managed to do and cover and very insightful. If you don't mind, what I'd like to do is ask Jen to set out what we are doing in response and then open it up to a more general discussion. So Jen, could you please?
Thank you, Michael. And I'm referring to the paper in the pack, which I think everyone has got, the Next Steps Action and Response paper. So we'll take it in a sense as read and just try and summarise so that we can move to the discussion. I think Helen has given us an excellent summary of her report, which was enormously helpful. And I just wanted to highlight that we have taken action during the period the report has been being put together and subsequent to us kind of seeing the early findings to address some of those very important elements that improve the experience and effectiveness of our volunteering offer here and now. And in particular, highlight to board my thanks to Danny, who's taken on the interim role of Community Resilience Manager and has really been instrumental in helping us to move things forward, with also thanks to Lara, Lara Waywell, who's provided senior management support. So I think Danny and his team have helped us make progress in a number of these areas outlined on the fourth page of the response, which include improving how we gather and submit data so that we can measure what our volunteers do, engaging much more closely with AACE, doing a really successful volunteer conference and enhancing our communications, working very closely with our dispatch team to enhance the partnership and use of CFRs, and engaging in more interaction, hearing volunteers' voice in terms of feedback to us, and perhaps most importantly, putting some interim actions in place to stabilise the leadership. So obviously Danny is part of that, but also we have done our best within the constraints that we're operating within to bring greater stability to the leadership of the function for the last 6 months, but for the coming 6 to 9 months as we work through our future approach. So I think it's important to note that we have tried to act on a number of those recommendations, and outlined in the report are some of those areas, including the emergency responder trial and the volunteers conference and other areas. I think in terms of our more strategic response, it's absolutely critical we now move to the engagement and proposal phase around a volunteering strategy for CCAM for the next 4 years to align with our trust strategy. And I think Helen's point around really focusing that on the outcomes that we can deliver for our staff and patients and the experience and engagement that we can have with our volunteers across a range of roles is absolutely critical. So we've taken the recommendations, the detailed recommendations that Helen has made, and what our response in effect is to undertake a consultative process to draw up the strategy, thinking about the volunteering role, the structure of the team, the leadership and the governance that we need, and how the volunteering offer is developed. But also through benefiting from discussion at a number of committees, we've identified some other strategic aspects that we can incorporate into our strategy. So, for example, ensuring that we're really robust around the safeguarding both for our volunteers and for our patients relating to this offer. Thinking about how we align with our charity work, what is the right approach to using charitable contributions to support volunteering in a really structured and sustainable way, alongside the right leadership of the substantive volunteering function. We've talked about measuring the impact and indeed the risks of volunteering and how they are mitigated. And also, I think really critically, we want to incorporate alignment with our broader community engagement strategy, in particular the Good Sam app, but also a kind of broader collaboration with our blue light partners so that we can engage most effectively with the greatest selection of colleagues across, in particular, areas where we see those health inequalities that Helen has referred to. So the strategy that we're going to develop through this consultative exercise probably has some areas that it kind of must do, but also has some options, I suppose, that we want to engage with people about. To what degree we focus on, for example, particular outcomes and pathways such as falls, which we are very keen to do in line with our strategy. To what extent and how do we really optimise that community engagement, education, Good Sam partnership offer? To what extent do we expand the role of the CFR and think about how we can increase recruitment and the leadership requirement that will go with that? So there are a number of different ways which we can do some or all of in our volunteering strategy, and commensurate with the option that we put together, we will need then to draw up a business case to invest both substantively and potentially through charitable routes in the volunteering function. And it's critical that we do that really robustly so that we can be sure that we're setting out a really firm foundation for the volunteering strategy and the delivery of that strategy in the coming years. So I think that probably summarises our approach. The timeline for this would be over the next 3 months to work with Danny and the team and with communications and other stakeholders to do that engagement, to develop the content of the strategy and also to develop the business case. We would bring that back through People Committee, who are the owner of this element of our board assurance objectives, and through to board as needed over the third quarter of the year. So the idea is to have completed, hopefully, the engagement, the structuring of the strategy and the kind of sign-off process over the next 6 months. And we will be, as noted in the paper, planning to update the board in December, hopefully with that strategy and business case.
Okay, thank you, Jen. That's really excellent. Just on one point, I presume Liz, as Chair Quality, you would be involved in this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so my comments, I think there is an overlap between the People and Quality Patient Safety Committee. I think we would like to see Helen's review come to the committee. I think to see how we can embed our volunteer workforce within our clinical strategy, but also align with the models of care work we're doing. Specifically, we are talking about falls, but there are other models of care, and I'll hand over to Richard probably, where our volunteer workforce could really enable us to deliver that safe, evidence-based timely care to our patients. I think the other area for me is understanding that clinical education and training requirements of our volunteer workforce, and that will sit under Jackie's remit, and that understanding our area of health inequalities and making sure that we have a significant volunteer workforce within our communities that have those health inequalities. So I think that mapping of that would be really important to us as an organisation to enable us to deliver the right approach and timely care to our patients out there. But I'll hand over to Richard, if that's all right, around the models of care. Thanks, Richard.
Before you come in, I am conscious that we've got Andrew and Lee from our governor community, who are both community first responders of long standing. I didn't know if you want to come to the front table and be part of this discussion, because I know you've got views as well. You need to be near a microphone, so it's entirely up to you, but we would very welcome your contribution. So while you're coming to the front, Richard, if you'd like to just deal with it.
Thanks very much, Chair. So Liz is absolutely correct that the models of care that we're developing at the moment, which is the implementation of the trust strategy, does include workforce planning, which involves our volunteer workforce. So each of the clinical leadership groups that are overseeing each model of care have been tasked with developing the workforce plans over the next 3 to 5 years. And as part of those workforce plans include the volunteer workforce, looking at a range of different roles that could contribute to each model of care. We've also got Tina, who's on board with us now as our workforce planning expert to support us with that development. So it's really positive.
Richard, thank you for that. And before I ask Lee and Andrew, there is reference to inequalities. We must know areas where we are we're underserved. Can you give me an indication of where they are, actually?
Shall I take that? So there is, and I can't remember for the life of me what it's called, but there's a government-produced map that essentially highlights the areas within the UK where there are particular areas of social deprivation or particular concerns, and we use that, and I've used it in a recent bid, in fact, to identify particular hotspots that would benefit from additional support. There's also the NHS Core 20+5 initiative, which again helps to focus on some of those particular areas of risk. So rather than highlighting any particular areas by name, they're the sources that we would use in order to identify those higher areas of risk and focus.
So you probably don't want, but it's really the assurance that we are focusing on those areas. That's what I'm really interested in. But Margaret.
Thank you. So yes, Julie Omrod is our health inequalities, and I'm the exec lead for that. So we're actually meeting next week in order, or when I come back from leave, in order to start working. So we'll be linking up with people like Danny to start drawing on a number of sources actually that start telling us where the deprivation and where the health inequalities sit across a number of different metrics. And that's the important thing really, because if you look at health outcomes, if you look at social deprivation, housing, there's a lot of intersectionality in that, but there's also some pockets that are quite interesting to us as health providers. So we will at some stage be bringing that back to the board committees in one form or another.
Thank you, Margaret. And Andrew and Lee, a real opportunity, your insights, anything from what you've heard or what you see as key priorities.
Thank you, Chair. I think the overwhelming feedback I've had from volunteers is that the Vine report is very well received. I think people recognise the key facts that Helen has brought forward, and certainly I'd commend the outcomes of her 62-point plan to the board generally. I think there are one or two points that I'd like to make separately. I think falls are very close to my interest personally, and I've been involved in the strategy to try to improve volunteers assisting the trust in falls for ever, it seems. Might be 4 years plus. We implemented a scheme, we had a trial, we've rolled that out, and we have, Danny would know this better than me, but about 180 people have gone through the falls training. So in March, according to the FIC papers, which I have recently attended, we had only 21 CFR attendances at falls, and in April we had 15. When I look at my other role as an emergency responder, the emergency responders in the West, the team that I lead, attended 13 C3 calls, mainly falls. So take that in the context of 15, 13-ish were attended by the West ER team. So it shows that it's not working. And I think we have a real issue as a trust that we need to grip because we've got a big investment in equipment. We've got a big investment in communities, community first responders being trained. And we have an opportunity to help those most vulnerable patients, as Dan has outlined in the comments that he made earlier. So I think it's a big area that I hope that we're going to focus on as a trust, how we engage with volunteers to get out there and get people off the floor. And that will have that knock-on effect, which Danny highlighted. That will mean they won't be conveyed to a hospital. Their health will improve as a consequence. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a paramedic to understand that. Lee,
before you go on, do you want to respond? Because you've got your new divisional structure, your operating model. Is that going to help in terms of a point of contact with community first responders, particularly in different geographic locations? But that's just my initial reaction.
I think we picked this point up after the FIC discussion, and I think I completely agree there's more to do with falls, and that falls is a hugely important priority for the strategy. But I think the picture is slightly more positive because Danny and I have discussed this after looking at that data, and I think the falls responses are going in the right direction now. I'm correct in saying, Danny, because we had that discussion. So happily, Andrew, I think we may have been slightly in a hiatus between the old and the new models, and we've seen a little bit of green shoots in the right direction. But absolutely, we are completely committed to prioritising falls, and we really hope that that's going to be a key part of the new strategy. But also, we already have a plan to optimise that here and now, rather than waiting for the development of the strategy. I think in relation to the divisional structure, where I think that will really help is relating to Helen's recommendation around the hub and spoke leadership structure, because what we're working through at the moment is how we might host very effectively a kind of hub, professional hub leadership structure for volunteering within our operational framework, and embed our volunteers more closely within the kind of frontline teams within each county. And that will enable us to develop those relationships, to really optimise the pathways, but also to have that local knowledge of where there is a gap in provision or a particular need, whether that's rurality or deprivation. So I do think the divisional structure will help, both from a kind of hub and spoke perspective, but also from that local embedding of the volunteering within the integrated frontline clinical team.
And Andrew, it's a really good challenge. I take some assurance from what Jen and Danny have said, but please, you can bring this back at council. I think we need to continue to have this discussion. So thank you for the challenge.
Volunteers want to help. That's what I'll leave it at.
Lee, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Chair. I won't add too much because I think Andrew's said quite a bit there, and I think the report covers a lot of detail, probably more so than we expected Helen to come out with. So it really was excellent work. I'm heading, you said we're long-standing, I'm heading myself into about the 14th year as a community first responder with the Trust. A lot has changed over that time, and I don't think necessarily the infrastructure behind us has changed as it needed to, and that's great that that is now being recognised. So I can only say thank you to the Trust for commissioning this report and for reviewing it and considering it. I think the future looks very good. I know Danny is only interim. Maybe that will change, but that's up to him and the Trust. But I think the future looks very promising. So thank you for going down through this process.
Lee, thank you for that comment, and genuine thanks from me for all the work that you and your colleagues do. Really, really important. I just want to ask any other questions, and then Simon, I'll give you the last word at the very end. Is that okay? So, any questions or observations people would like to make? Please, yes.
I'm just curious with the recommendations by Helen on her report and looking for specifically, and knowing perhaps Hannah Community perhaps was one which does amazing work. I was curious myself in my rural community to get involved, and I saw on the job description it was quite a vast region, and I would be interested, under my volunteer in my community anyway, whether we were particularly affected by the health inequalities you mentioned. Is there a space that I can look inside of the CCAM space or the website to be able to understand what is the demand in my community?
Simon, please.
It's a great question. So if you look at the report that Dan Cody and team produced last time, I'm sure Richard can make that available. It maps our health inequalities data into local geographies. So we can see where we are doing well, which is great to start with, but we can also see where we need to do better. And the point I was making was it's the areas in which we need to do better that I'm particularly keen that we focus our effort. Because, you know, one of life's great emergencies is a cardiac arrest. Surely to goodness, you should have the same access to a defibrillator no matter where you live. I know in other parts of the country, say for example, in London, not the easiest geography to navigate, they're setting themselves the target of being no more than 4 minutes away from a defibrillator. And I think that's a noble aspiration, and one, it may not be entirely translatable into our context given the rurality point, but it's one that we should certainly have in our heads when we're looking at aspirations. So I'd encourage colleagues to read that report. It was commended indeed by the national lead from AACE as being an exemplar report.
Thanks, Simon, and thank you for your question. I'm not sensing any other questions at this point in time. I do sense tremendous support for what we're doing in this space and for the work of our volunteers. But can I leave the last question to Helen? Can I come in a moment? Helen, could I ask you, often people are commissioned to do these types of reports, and they do a really good job, and then at the end of the day, nothing happens. From what you've heard and from your engagement, are we as a trust responding in the way that you would expect to your report?
Thank you for the question. And yes, absolutely is the answer. Absolutely. You have, the organisation has already addressed and implemented, addressed some of the issues and implemented some of the recommendations. Yes, I'm hugely optimistic about the future of volunteering at CCAM.
Thank you for that, and I'm sorry to have put you on the spot. And you could have said no if you felt. I know you would have done, but thank you.
I would have done.
Yeah, I know you. Thank you very much.
Just a final point to leave with, echoing everyone's thanks for the amazing work that's been done. There's quite a few references in the report to how, in some ways, we're going to be looking towards charitable funds and some of the deficiencies that we've got in funding elsewhere. And I guess I'm just left with a thought for us to take away is this a mission creep where we're filling gaps which really in the past would have been paid for by the NHS? And if so, that may well be fine, but I think it needs to be a conscious policy move. And I'm interested from Helen as to whether is that something that's happening more widely as a consequence of some of these issues that we're all facing?
I'm happy to respond, Chair, if you'd like me to. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. This might be so. Every organisation has always, historically for the past 20 years, had some struggles around funding for volunteering. It's quite with that, and part of that is to do with the lack of robust data that's been available, which is why ACE set up the volunteering dashboard 2.5 years ago now to try and support trusts to have robust metrics and data which evidence impact and therefore underpin business cases. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is, and I have said this a number of times in different forums, there is an opportunity for a conversation with our commissioners about commissioning volunteering activity, because you can demonstrate that it gives a significant impact and benefit to patients and to communities in so many different ways. So, and I don't know whether that's something that might be worth consideration and exploration within your system.
Okay, Helen, that's a really interesting challenge. Actually, in the current circumstances, it's a legitimate one. I mean, just generally on our charities, I think we've recognised at CCAM for a while that we haven't had the infrastructure around our fundraising activity, and that's really under Janine's leadership. We now have recruited Vicky. And Janine, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say, in response to Karen's point and Helen's point, obviously we are fundamentally changing our approach to our charity and how we use that. I think moving forward, there are two important points. We need to be intentional about how we are spending our money in a strategic way. So it's about that, the thought behind that. What we also need to be is mindful of the experiences of some of our colleagues in other ambulance services and learn from their experiences. We know our colleagues at SCAS, for example, have had a very successful charity that they have used to support their volunteering quite significantly over the last few years. But they have some lessons they've learned from that as the economic climate in the country changes and charitable donations flex. So I think actually there's some real synergy. Danny and I have spoken already about this volunteering review and us looking at our approach moving forward and our charitable strategy refresh coming on board at the same time. So I just think it's important to be intentional around this rather than sort of ad hoc.
Janine, thank you for that, and you're quite right to bring out that we are working quite closely with SCAS as we go forward as part of a collaborative I'm going to bring, unless Simon, you want
So just to end this segment, if I may, so from my point of view, just want to end firstly while you're sitting at the table by saying on our behalf to all of you, but particularly to Andrew and Lee, thank you for your commitment over multiple, I'm also now needing to say decades of service. I know you probably didn't want to hear that, but genuinely thanks for all you do. I think I just want to reflect on one thing that Helen said, which is, I think, our responsibility as a board, which is evolution into strategy, because I think some of the issues that we are grappling with they're a consequence of us adopting an incremental, solution-based, focused to particular issues, rather than taking a properly strategic approach to this. And I think, Jan, Danny, you've all emphasised the fact that we need to take a much more strategic approach to that. It's a hateful phrase, but seeing volunteering as a strategic asset, as essential to delivering our clinical strategy, I think is at the core of our challenge as a board. So my commitment to you is, beyond any of the immediate tactical challenges, is that we will continue to debate this in public as a board, so that you can hold us to account for the progress that we make and the challenges that we have articulated here. Because the best tribute, back to Michael's point, we can make to the report is that we don't put it in a drawer and say, great report, see you in another few years, but we come back to it every 6 months and we mark our homework. We've actually got some days left with Helen, and I've asked her to help keep us honest in holding a mirror up to our progress, so that we're not just doing that for ourselves, but I think it's really important that we bring you and others back into this room on a periodic basis, so that you can hold us to account. And we will come back with a strategy. And my personal commitment, and I think you've heard it from around this room, is that by this winter we are continuing to develop that difference of people who wait the longest in terms of falls. But thank you very much. That was all I wanted to say, Michael.
Thanks, Simon, and thank you generally for that commitment. We're now at the point where we will break for coffee or tea. I said at the very beginning, our aim for today is to very much focus on CCAM people, of which volunteers make a major contribution. So I would echo Simon's thanks for all that is done. When we return, we will be focusing on other aspects of people and their development within the organisation. But could I ask you to be back at 20 to 12, please? Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. The second part of the board meeting. So now we move into the integrated performance report, and we're going to focus specifically on our people enjoy working at CCAM, and we've got a series of reports, and this is really an opportunity to look at how are we managing risks to ensure that we create the right people environment. So I'm going to ask Max, as chair of the People Committee, to summarise his report. There'll be opportunity for Tina to respond, and then I'll open it up for questions, and then we've got a series of papers, reports about the HR Development Improvement Programme, if I've got the words right, our EDI strategy and the work that we're doing there, and finally, very importantly, our freedom to speak up and the culture that we have supporting that. So firstly, Max, over to you on the People Committee report, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So 3 main topics we covered at the last People Committee, first of which was the volunteering report and next steps on the strategy, and we've already had a rich discussion on that. We also discussed the recent NHSE senior leadership conversation held with the Trust on Education. We discussed the report and requirements and sought and received assurance that we were both on track with the interventions and that we would be able to provide the relevant evidence to NHS England by or before the dates set. And then we also received a verbal update on our work in support of the Sexual Safety Charter and making CCAM a safer place to work and speak up, including for our students specifically, which links well to the NHSE education leadership conversation. The headline really is making progress, but more work to do, and we look forward to the detailed paper and discussion on the topic in July's People Committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I open it up for questions before Tina? You may want to make any questions of what Max has said at this point. Okay, Tina, did you want to respond to any aspects of that?
Yeah, thank you. Just some headlines to add from the work that's been going on within the People Department. So in regards to the leadership, we have completed the review and restructure of the executive team roles, as the board are aware. But our focus for 25-26 is to provide the right support and development for our senior leaders through our leadership development program that is underway and is initially starting with our executive and deputy director cohorts. In regards to the divisional operating model, appointments have been made to the 3 new divisional director posts, and now we are able to continue into the next phases, where we will be engaging with our staff and our managers in particular to design the structures that support that divisional model and ensure our integration with multidisciplinary teams at the centre for care for our patients. It was a successful way for us to use that engagement approach for our corporate restructures, so we're looking to replicate that across the divisional change as well. As mentioned, the corporate restructure, just to update, the outcome for the consultation was yesterday. So we are now working through implementing that change, and some feedback for the board, which I think is very positive, is that we had significant engagement from our people around that corporate change and a lot of input and a lot of feedback. And in particular, there was real response to that feedback that did lead to change from the original structures that were put forward and those that have been confirmed yesterday. The other area is in our EDI, and we are about to have a presentation shortly, but we continue to invest in our training and development of our managers to improve the experience for all of our staff in this area. The focus in 25-26 will be on continuing to improve the management of our ER casework and respond more effectively when our concerns are raised, and also focusing on concluding those legacy cases, which we know have been an area of focus for us over last year as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tina. But is it Jen? You were going to say something about the IQR as well, is that?
Yeah, I'm really happy to. Just to sort of frame, Tina's given a very helpful summary, and I think has led us into a positive piece of work that we've done to enhance the usefulness of the IQR. So, as I said, Tina's and indeed Max have just spoken to the executive summary in the people section of the IQR. But I thought it might be worth just noting that in the papers we have the people, quality and sustainability IQR sections, and I know Simon referenced it in his Chief Exec's report, but we've been very pleased to have refreshed the IQR for this financial year to enhance its alignment with the Board Assurance Framework and to evolve it following our exit from RSP, and that's been done in its first version, coming to this board today in partnership with many colleagues. So thank you very much to Peter, to Nick, to Simon Bell, to Steve Lennox for their input, and the BI team have worked hard with us to do this. So we're going to be taking feedback on the IQR, all 3 of the sections, over the next 2 board cycles, so the next 6 months, just to make sure that we have got it right and that we can make any changes that are needed following its journey through the committees and the further input of committee chairs and colleagues. So it's an agile process, but we hope what this version of the IQR does is not only align more closely with the BAF, but also address some of the board development elements. So actually what we've done is try to bring more effective commentary and oversight, as I referenced with Tina, to each of the sections, and then to bring an overall executive summary together, which allows us to more effectively triangulate what's going on across the IQR. And then also we're going to be using the IQR as our core performance report throughout the organisation and focusing on using it to identify, curiously questioning and identifying areas where improvement is needed, and through deep dives and tracking improvement, aligning with our Tier 1 programmes to use it as a tool for action and delivery. So, I mean, that's quite an ambitious agenda, but I think it's the right thing to do with a report that is so critical to the delivery of our strategy and the right things for our patients and our people, that I'm very excited about evolving it over the next few months and hopefully having a report that can really set us on the right path for the future. What I did want to say was that includes refocusing on some areas which I also think are really important moving forward, in particular productivity. You'll see when we come to the sustainability section that there is a big focus on productivity in that area of the BAF. We've significantly increased our range of metrics that the board and then the Finance Investment Committee will consider. But also to pick up the alignment with our models of care in the quality section, which is still awaiting a little bit of work around developing more sophisticated and effective metrics around things like falls, rethinking about cardiac. There are, as Liz said earlier, other models of care are available. So we need to think about what we need in that section. And then the last one I wanted to mention, because it's relevant to people, is we have refocused the metrics in the people section and I think refreshed them quite effectively. But we are very aware that there needs to be more focus on diversity and inclusion within our people metrics. So again, that's an area that's under development, as indeed is health inequalities, which I think sits in the quality section actually, doesn't it? So I did want to highlight that this is not, any report should always be subject to review and scrutiny and improvement, but we are particularly looking to kind of improve this for next time around. So feedback is very welcome, just recognising that there is, as per best practice insightful board guidance, a kind of practical limit to how much can be included in a report. So it's trying to strike the balance of being addressing all the right areas while creating a manageable report that flows through committee and triangulates effectively.
Jen, that's really good. Before I open it, can I ask one question? So inevitably, we are changing for the good, but change always has risks associated with it. And I'm interested in, as you introduce your new, your divisional structure, which is a different way of working, are you confident the indicators will enable you to say, yes, this is having a positive impact on patient care? Is it that degree of granularity that and I'm not saying that necessarily has to come to the board, that's more an executive function, but it's been able for the committee chairs to get the assurance that change is being implemented effectively. But Margaret, I think, may want to come in as well, but Julia.
I mean, I can just say, yes, we're going to be using the IQR now on a monthly basis. It's going to be refreshed monthly, and it's going to be scrutinised within operations and within the divisions. Much of the data is available at divisional and even more localised levels. So it will enable us to see delivery against our clinical priorities and our people priorities and our sustainability outcomes within the divisions, both across the 3 counties and also integrated care and our resilience function. You'll see there's a metrics around resilience being developed as well, I should have mentioned. So I think that the answer to that is yes. Again, Rome wasn't built in a day, and we need to think about sort of how we make that really strong connection between our Tier 1 programmes, our productivity and efficiency programme, and the report, so that we're really tracking what is being delivered and what we need to do differently. But I think in principle, certainly yes.
Okay, thank you. And Margaret, you wanted to come.
Yeah, just to corrupt this people bit with a bit of quality. Just to give you an example, Michael, to give you assurance that you'll notice under the quality metrics for quite a long time now, they've been very stable, because what it's given us is a centralised view of what's going on across a whole horde of things. What the divisional structure allows us to do now is have the capacity to drill down. So we've had that local and divisional level data available for a while, but we haven't had the capacity or the people to look at that together. So we'll be looking for variations now. So actually for me, under the quality umbrella, it's a really exciting step, and because we will be able to drill down and we will be able to address and link it to the local population and the health of that population.
Thank you. Simon and then
Firstly, just on the IQR, to echo the thanks to the work that's been done right across the team. Hopefully, Howard, we've now heard and embraced your challenge and started on that journey of getting it into a better place. But it is not finished, and I would just want to echo what Jen said and invite all committee chairs working with us over the next few months, because we shouldn't rush this, we should get it right, to make sure that the metrics that we have are the ones that are absolutely the ones that we need. And to your point, Michael, the biggest assurance that we can give is that the IQR then becomes the lingua franca of performance in the organisation. No matter where you look at it, you can lens to the specific area. Second point, if today's theme is about people, I think the theme for the August board is productivity, and there is a debate to be had about what lens do you start the productivity conversation from. Does that, for example, start to get down to individual crew level, looking at differentials across our patch? I think it's a conversation we need to understand better than we do at the moment. Third point, just specifically on the people, just to add to what Tina said, I think I'm particularly passionate this year about making sure not only on the development programs do we have a development program for the executive, which we do, we've also started a development for deputies. I think our ability to give assurance around succession planning and building resilience in the organisation is a key strategic priority in our people. It's not just about doing things in the individual functions, which is really important. It's also about building that resilience so that when you look at us as board members, you know that sitting behind us is somebody who can step into, as Tina has so ably done this morning, step into the shoes of us all. And that's a really key part of the development for this year. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon. And I really echo the point about resilience. That's so important. But Howard, you've been a champion of this. Would you like to come in, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, notwithstanding the fantastic work that's going on in terms of improving this report, in the statistics that you've provided this month, I did have one question. So a lot of the statistics are indeed reasonably stable. The one for me that stood out as unstable, for which I'm not comfortable, I need more assurance on around the solution, and that is on slide 12, the subject of the mean suspension duration, which seems to be heading inexorably upwards. And it is obviously a KPI. There is a target. And the explanation talks about involving external agencies and that we cannot proceed to take action, which is maybe true, but given that we do have a target, what is the plan? Because it's not clear to me on that particular one what the plan is as to how we get it down. Thank you.
I don't know who wants to respond. Tina, please.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a difficult metric to look at because the most important thing for us is to ensure that where there are these difficult cases, they are resolved as quickly as possible, and we reduce the harm to our people and all the people involved in these cases. Some of these ones in particular are quite complex, and as it says, they do involve external agencies, which in some ways delays some of the actions that we can take. But the broader question about what are we doing is there's a number of different strategies, if you like, that we are taking. In particular, this is about trying to reduce the number of cases that come forward. So improving our managers' understanding and our policies in order to support our managers to be able to address these at source. We've introduced a mediation program and mediators being able to do a lot more of the local resolution so that these things don't become bigger than they should be in that first instance. The complex cases, of course, they are never really suitable for something like mediation. So we are doing more targeted training about some of that complexity. For example, sexual safety investigation training and having a much more robust process around example, our sexual safety or our sexual misconduct cases. And we also, within the restructure that's just been approved or released yesterday, that is supported in particular by a transition team. And that transition team is specifically around addressing the ER caseload, the current complex ER cases, as well as putting in some of that additional training and support to help to change the way in which the culture looks at grievance culture, if you like, so that there is a much more open and transparent approach to saying, actually, let's try and find a way to have a resolution rather than feeling so constrained that you have to go into a grievance process. So this in particular is reflective of a number of complex cases that have been around for quite a long time, and a change in culture to the way that some of our more difficult cases that may not have been brought forward previously are now coming to us. But equally, we don't want to see those sorts of metrics. So over the next 3 months, I would expect they're coming down, but these are long and complex, so it's more like a 6-month plan, but we can bring that back through the People Committee to give that assurance.
Thank you.
Howard, thank you for that. And obviously I'll leave it for the People Committee, but you raised a legitimate question. So I'd like just to include as an action, when we come back to the next board in August, I don't want a paper, but we just ask for an update where we are on those particular cases. That would be very, very valuable. Thank you. Any other questions? Because I'm conscious of the agenda. I want to move on to the next substantive item, but no? Okay. Can I just finish on one particular aspect? Max, your very good summary. Your next meeting, I think you will be looking at progress in creating the right environment for sexual safety. I think that is really, really important. I know, Margaret, you were telling me you'd been out to the university quite recently to talk to students. Really, really want to focus on update of that of the next board, that we are moving in the right space, and particularly, you know, young women coming into this organisation, new paramedics, the start of their career. It's really, really important that they get the right experience, and you know that they're working in the right environment. So really support what you're going to do. Really support the executive. I'm not calling anybody out, but I really want this to be an organisation where this is no longer an issue. I think we all want that. But so you have our support in that particular space. If we could move on to the next item, which I think we go on to the update on the HR improvement programme. So Tina, over to you again.
Thank you, and I'll make this a quick summary so that we can move on. So just a reminder to everybody that the People Improvement Plan, particularly for HR being so complex and somewhat deep-seated, this is going to be a 3-year plan, and we need some more time across those 3 years in order to be able to really make changes at the grassroots, so to speak, rather than just real high-level changes that we find things returning. So building from last year, there is continuity from where we finished last year, and some fantastic things were rolled out, in particular around the training. We are now working into the next part of that plan, but recognising there is still a lot more to do. We've had the restructure of the people services function now underway. As I said, the consultation has closed and those new structures are approved. So we're now into the implementation phase. And all of those posts will be in place and active from September, which is when we expect a real change in the way that the people services starts to operate and support the organisation. There are risks within our people improvement plan that we have identified, and in particular there is a risk around the implementation on the capacity to be able to deliver. We recognise that with a lot of change, and in particular this consultation, that could have a significant impact. So in order to support that, and also to particularly focus on the ER caseload, there is that transitional team in place to help manage that capability and capacity. And that was all I was going to add today, Chair.
Okay, could I open that up to questions? So for me, as a board, we need to be assured that this HR development plan is going to achieve its intended outcomes. It's a 3-year strategy. So for me, it's a question around appropriate resource, support for the people trying to implement this programme, and actually for CCAM people beginning to feel a difference. I suppose it's a statement there rather than a question, but what's your view on that? Can you give us that assurance?
I would love to look at you and say, yes, I can give that assurance right now. I think what I can give you is the assurance that that is the outcome, is that this is about it looking and feeling different for everybody at every level, and being able to bring that information in to hear that from our people and from our patients is really important, because otherwise we are doing it in an echo chamber. The other thing I would say about do we feel it's making a difference, there are things that we get that is feedback to us that helps us to understand we're on the right track. Now, maybe some of the metrics aren't there yet because they will take longer. But for example, out of the ER training that we did last year with our managers, they have said, I feel much more confident going into these hearings now or into these conversations because I know where I stand, because I know I've got this training. So it's those sorts of things that are playing back to us about how we're going along it.
Okay, and I'll bring Simon in, but clearly the People Survey, the most recent one, show that we're moving in that direction, but still, Simon, please.
You'll be, I hope, assured to know that we continue to debate this as an executive management group, and yesterday was the latest debate on that. So it forms part of our, an absolutely core part of our thinking and the way we spend time. 2 points. The first, general, we will have an opportunity as a board to spend time with senior leaders, because remember, in our board development sessions, we don't only meet as a board, we meet with our OUMs Plus group and some of the other senior leaders in the organisation. My suggestion is, in this space, we should actually ask, does this start to feel different? Because there is nothing more powerful than actually asking the people who frankly have to use most of these services on a day-to-day basis, does it look or feel different to you? So I think the test of this board is when you're next sitting with them, you ask them that question and we can make that space available. We did actually touch directly on your question yesterday. What is the core sentinel metric that we need to focus on in this next period? Because it's a 3-year plan, so you can't conceptualise all of it to the end. And for me, the next 6 months is, at the end of this, can we look at the People Services Directorate and say, do we now have the substantively appointed staff who are going to lead this directorate forward? Because in order for it to feel different, we need to recruit the substantive staff. So that's the thing. And I've asked the team to be able to describe People Services Committee, People Committee can pick this up. Where we are now in terms of recruitment on that journey, where do we need to be by point X so we can monitor progress? Because if we don't have the right people in the right jobs over the next few months, then fundamentally the confidence that day-to-day leaders will have in that process will remain stretched or uncertain. So that would be the metric that I would ask people to focus on, and perhaps via you, Max, invite the People Committee to particularly pick up on. It's been our experiences, get the right people in the right jobs and you have half a chance of doing it.
Okay, Simon, thank you. I'm encouraged by that. I would stress, as board chair, it is important as NEDs we are all assured in this space, because in the past it has been a significant challenge for the organisation. Before you were here, Simon, so I'm not saying that. So I just want to ask a few other NEDs their view on this. So, Subo, you have been chair of People Committee, did a very good job in that. What you've heard, does that give you encouragement?
I don't quite know how to answer that, Chair. I think we've looked at it at People Committee, and I think we continue to challenge it and probe the improvement plan. I think my view is it's probably a bit too early to say at the moment. I don't think I have full assurance. I think we'd probably say it's partial assurance.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think the IQ or some of the metrics are not really moving, particularly in the ER space at the moment.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that I have full assurance on that.
Okay, and that's good. That's fine. Can I ask one other question, though? That you did the People Committee for a number of years, for which we're very grateful. Is there anything missing that you see here in this plan that you would want to see? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I didn't tell you in advance I was going to ask that question.
I don't think there's anything particularly missing. I think I probably will ask some questions around leadership and management training. I think OD, what's happening around OD for the organisation. And we're coming to the FTSE report there, which, I have some concerns that it sort of contradicts what we are seeing through the staff survey results. So I still have concerns about the culture of the organisation, if we are still far enough along, and do we need to put something more into the improvement plan to help with that? So those would be my sort of inclinations.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I just, when we're going to talk about this again, can we capture those points, because they are important points? I want to get the assurance, and we can come back to them. So thank you for that. But Karen, I'd like to ask your view, because you're still relatively new to the organisation. From your experience, and you've got academic background in this space, so I'm just interested in your view on it.
Sorry. So I think some of the points that have been raised, thank you, Subo, we are cited on, and there is the need to move on that. But as Tina and others have said, that can take time. I think the question is, how much time have we got? So, and I guess the other comment I'd make that hasn't already been made is where we are in that process at the moment, because I'm conscious a number of the papers referred to the consultation. So some of the people that we're asking to help us with this are also being consulted with. And I guess my other question is, are we looking after them? And clearly not everyone may be accounted for at the end. And how can we have some assurance on that in terms of well-being for all of our staff?
Yes, it's been a really important part of this process, and we made a conscious decision as an organisation under the principles of the restructure to start with talking to our people about what was coming, making sure that we had the additional services through the wellbeing, through our OH provider, for example, but just through our management, so that they were prepared and had the space to be able to have conversations, allowing people to have time to input, put some empowerment into there, but equally allows us time to meet with them and just check in and see how they're going, and encourage each other to ask, how are you going? So I think throughout that there has been a really consistent focus on, are you okay? And how does this feel? But recognising that the climate we're all in and the reality of some of the outcomes is that this is going to be tough for some people, and following up and making sure. So it has been front and centre for all that we've been doing.
Thank you. And I think we have reflected that may well affect how some people are feeling at the moment. So thank you for that. My other point would be around, I think it's important to remember, and the point's been made a number of times at this table, that these issues are not just the domain of HR. It's for all of us to challenge how we're working. And I think the presentation Peter gave earlier about what we're doing as a board, and also developing the leaders in the organisation, is absolutely critical, because this is something that is everybody's responsibility. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Michael. So I've been here now for about 2 months as Chief Digital Information Officer, and I think what I've been able to see here is we've done some really good work on the SBC charts and getting the basic information available, particularly on people metrics. But we have struggled with resource in the data and analytics team to do deeper dives into the data to understand why we're seeing what we're seeing. So we have increased the resources into that team. We have another new senior employee joining that team in the next 2 weeks. And I think together with increased resource in that space to be able to analyse better, and what I've been hearing from staff in the operational teams closer to the front line, we have struggled to provide those teams with more of a self-service on the data. So one of the things, and I'll bring back something on this to the August board when we look at the strategy for digital, is our direction of travel to provide some better tooling around being able to understand and interrogate the data more at a divisional and a local team level, so that we don't just present bland statistical data, but we allow teams to dive into it and understand a bit more so we can make better interventions. So that's one of the things that we'll do.
Thank you for that, and I agree with you. I think that's really, really essential. So look forward to that. Finally, Mochkan, you come from a different background. You've worked on different trusts. What's your take on where CCAM is at the moment?
Thank you, Chair. I guess the main points have been made by colleagues, but one positive for me has been the improvement journey around HR visibility. That was something that came out very strongly in our development day initially. And I know I've been keen to ask that question, how are you going to increase the HR visibility, particularly to support the managers? And I've been very encouraged by the improvement or the attempts that have been made for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I bring this to a conclusion. Sorry to put you a bit on the spot here, but this is such an important issue. I think the message you're getting is we are assured by the direction of travel, but inevitably we want more. I really echo Karen's point. It can be quite lonely in this leadership role. So genuine thanks to you and Sarah for what you're doing, and to know that while we are a board, you can come back to us and say this isn't working. That's not to hold you to account for that. It's really to say, well, if it's not working, how can we help? How can we move it in the right direction? Because we are a reflective board and we really want to make a difference. But genuine thanks for what you are doing. Sorry, I think you go on to the next one now, which is EDI.
Thank you, and I'll do a really quick introduction, just conscious of time, Chair. But thank you to Dawn and Carol Ann for attending today. Just to introduce where the conversation's going, we developed and reviewed the CCAM High Impact Action Plan around our EDI, and it identified a large number of actions. And the reality is, and what we've learnt from last year, is that to try and do everything all at once, we generally don't do anything well enough. So we've now worked through our trust board, through a development session with trust leaders, our staff network involvement as well, to identify a smaller number of high priorities that will enable us to focus this year on. So Carol Ann and Dawn, you'll talk through the work and that we've done today and establish and agree these and what and how we intend to ensure our EDI is embedded. So thank you both.
Thank you, Tina. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dawn Chilcott and I'm the Interim Assistant Director of OD and Culture. And I'm pleased to be here today to go through the EDI update. And it's about reflecting on the important work that we've undertaken throughout our dedicated board development days, focusing purely on equality, diversity and inclusion. I would like to introduce my colleague who is also supporting the presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Carol Ann Tendrin and I'm the EDI Manager for the Trust.
Thank you, Carol Ann. And within this presentation, we would like to cover an executive summary and governance. We would like to go through the outcomes from the EDI board development sessions that have been held in March and May of this year, a summary of the Trust's 4 key focus areas and our activity that we're looking to undertake over the next 12 months, and then our next steps. So our dedicated board development sessions have brought together over 50 colleagues across our executive, non-executive leadership, our operational teams, HR and our staff network leads, creating a really powerful space to deepen our collective understanding, driven by lived experiences and our external expertise that we've also brought into the Trust to help us. Our most recent session was in May, with the support of the NHS Race and Health team. And they challenged us to really think boldly about the board's role in creating a lasting legacy for EDI. and one that moves beyond words and takes us through into actions. From these discussions, we've identified 4 key priorities that will guide our work over the next 12 months. They are empowering and developing our staff networks, ensuring our recruitment processes are inclusive, enhancing staff development opportunities, and strengthening our analytics and our reporting. These priorities are now embedded within our trust-wide EDI delivery plan, which includes clear objectives, governance, and that will be through our People and Culture Committee, and regular reporting to ensure transparency and measuring our impact. We're also evolving our approach, moving from our centralised EDI model to one that's distributed and owned locally within our new divisions. This shift is about building a system-wide culture of inclusion that endures, not one that relies on an individual champion, but our embedded way of how we're going to work for going forward each and every day. Caroline will walk us through the implementation strategy, highlighting how we're going to bring this vision to life and ensure measurable, meaningful progress for our year ahead. So please, over to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Dawn. As has already been mentioned, we have held 2 separate board development sessions, both of which showcase some interesting key themes. In March, we dug deep into our own data. So we looked at the workforce race equality standards, the workforce disability equality standards, and our gender pay gap reports, and heard directly from staff about the lived realities behind those figures. Some of the themes included questions about the accuracy of our data, a need to better support colleagues around disability and religion, gaps in cultural intelligence, underrepresentation in senior roles, and the desire from staff networks to have greater influence and structure. In May, the Observatory provided fresh challenge and insight, highlighting that isolated diversity training is not enough. What they suggested works best are mandated and supported programs, executive sponsorship, safe spaces for discussion, and data-led evaluation. These findings are now embedded in how we approach our 4 focus areas. The first focus area is around staff networks. We are investing in the growth and sustainability of our networks, with executive and non-executive sponsors now in place. Activities include listening events in response to the UK Supreme Court ruling, co-led with our Pride Network, launching an accredited development programme for network leads this June, and formal opportunities for networks to influence trust policies and decisions. Focus Area 2 is around inclusive recruitment. A trust-wide inclusion ambassador programme launches next month, supporting equity in recruitment processes. We are also looking to pilot internal recruitment surveys to identify experience gaps, reviewing our approach to disability confident accreditation, aiming to move from level 1 to level 2, delivering inclusive recruitment training for hiring managers. The third focus area is around staff development, and we're aiming to expand access to EDI training across all levels, including embedding inclusion in leadership development programs, rolling out a series of Beyond Bias workshops, scaling our reverse mentoring scheme with Cohort 2 launching in November this year, and aligning our HR business partners to support divisional EDI implementation. The last focus area is around data insights, and data is the foundation for accountability. We are building a comprehensive EDI dashboard with a final version due in August. We're improving intersectional analysis of career progression, pay, and disciplinary data. And we are committing to quarterly updates to senior leadership and governance forums. I'm now going to pass you back over to Dawn to talk through next steps.
Thank you, Caroline. So over the next 12 months, we're going to be looking at the integration of the 4 focus areas within the Trust EDI plan. And as I've already said, with clear lines of accountability and very clear objectives. Oversight through the People and Culture Committee and quarterly updates will ensure that we are on target and be able to make those challenges and change our course of action if appropriate. We will be implementing our new people service with a comprehensive development of the divisional business partners to ensure support and delivery of that EDI plan at local level and at service level. The use of that data to track our progress and help measure that success, supporting learning and course correction if appropriate. We also have further board level EDI development days on our next session has already been booked for July, and the development of the new inclusion strategy, which is due to launch in November of this year. So that just leaves me to say thank you for listening to our presentation today, and I'll hand back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, very eloquent, and there's a lot in there, so, and thank you genuinely for the work that we did. And we did have the board development day, I think it was 2 months ago, I can't remember now, was it 2 months ago? I don't know. The inevitable question the board has to ask is, are we being ambitious enough in this space? And I'd welcome colleagues' view, both executive and non-executive. There's a lot to do, you know, as an organisation, we've got so much to do, but it's not a bad point to, are we, Margaret, you were going to look as though you were going to say something.
I'm really happy to say something, being the exec sponsor for 2 of the staff networks at the moment. I think actually the approach being taken is the right approach. And the reason I say that is because it reflects what Tina said. In the past, we have tried this at the end of our development session last time, if you recall, when we had the Health Observatory. It could feel overwhelming, couldn't it? It is such a big task that I think focusing on the 4 things and looking at the 4 things that have been put to us, I certainly feel very supportive of it. I think one of the most important things is for us to understand where the voices aren't being heard, and the staff networks are certainly part of that. And then how do we build the culture and the environment where people feel safe to come through those avenues and different avenues to actually enter into the organisation, and what do we need to do structurally to enable that to happen? And that's our responsibility, isn't it, as the board? I do have one question for our lovely ladies, which is I noticed in the most effective strategy to take on, the creation of those psychologically safe spaces is one of the most effective. And I was just trying to look through the 4 priorities where you see that happening and in what format.
I think you touched on it already, Margaret, in terms of the staff network. So one of the key areas of work for this coming 12 months will be focusing on our support of the staff network leads, because they are really influential in us providing those safe spaces. One of the examples goes back to the UK Supreme Court ruling, whereby we worked really closely with our Pride network and we held listening events, but also provided additional forums for colleagues to speak up through the the confidential Microsoft forms, and through that forum as well, we found that people were able to speak up a lot more freely. So supporting the staff network chairs to be able to lead the staff networks better will support us in that work, but obviously it goes along with all the culture transformation work that is also happening alongside it, because it won't just be EDI's role to provide a psychologically safe environment.
Yeah, I think in terms of ambition, one of the things I'd like us to think about maybe this year leading into next is how we embrace EDI in thinking about our clinical practice. So we know that we have inequalities of access. We talked about that in the context of volunteering earlier. So how our response to our populations, the populations we serve in that space, affects outcomes, I think would be important for us to think about.
Really good point, which I would support. But
yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dawn and Caroline, for the update and the recent sessions that we've had as a board. One idea and then 2 questions. First idea, I think it's great that you shout out, as it were, the exec and non-exec sponsors. Thank you to colleagues for doing that. I wonder if it's worth looking at training for them, so to make sure that we, in our different roles, can be as effective as possible. And then a question of curiosity, which is, how will the new divisional structure and the realignment of people services set us up for achieving our EDI goals more effectively than the current setup? And I'll do the next question after.
Thank you. So, as we say, we're going through a journey with the people restructure at the moment, and it's about, I think we've already said, is ensuring that we've got the right people in those roles to be able to help support the EDI journey. So it's about ensuring that we get the right people with the right skills in those HR business partner roles. And we've already set up, myself and Carol-Anne meet with the current HR BPs on a monthly basis to go through the EDI challenges and allow them to become a lot more comfortable with the EDI strategies. So it is about us spending time with them, educating, and potentially help filling a little gap.
Can I add?
Of course, sorry.
We are also working really closely with the CIPD. So Dawn did a piece of work in regards to looking at our frameworks when it comes to skills and knowledge within the HR Directorate. And within the CIPD, there's a core module for EDI. So that will enable us to identify the skills gap and in knowledge to support us with supporting our colleagues in being able to support with, I'm saying support a lot, but support with the delivery of the plan.
Please.
I just wanted to respond briefly on that point because I think it is everybody's responsibility to support and sponsor diversity and inclusion within our workforce and indeed to champion addressing health inequalities for our patients. And I think the two are not totally unconnected. So I just want to say, although I'm very keen to support the new divisional model and it will enable many things, I'm not sure whether the divisional order particularly in and of itself is the critical factor in regards to this programme because it's not, we've got a new HR structure and it has some additional supporting resources in terms of our learning and development regarding diversity and inclusion. But as you have rightly said, that needs to be then embedded in our business partnership offer from HR, but most importantly, it needs to be embedded in our leadership practice and our managers at every level, and should not be the responsibility either of a diversity and inclusion team, nor indeed of an HR business partner. So whether it is through divisions, whether it is in operational management, whether it is in clinical leadership, I think the most important thing is that we come with an open mind to that learning and we have a safe and a positive framing for being more diverse and inclusive. And I think the focus areas actually are really helpful because it can help us to think as leaders what more specifically can I do. It gives us a framework for progressing our practice because sometimes the subject can feel a bit overwhelming. And a response to that can be make it someone else's responsibility. That's your job, Carol-Anne, I don't need to do it. But that's not right. So making it more manageable for people, I really strongly support that. And I think that goes across our clinical and operational leadership and management.
Thank you. Simon and then Tim.
Just firstly to say thank you, right? I mean, because you've done some really great work over the last few months. I did want to appreciate that, and I think you slightly undersold, Carol-Anne, the work you did in response to the Supreme Court judgment, which I know was really impactful for colleagues. And often I think these efforts to improve diversity and inclusion are what you do in the quiet background of actually making things more accessible for people. And I know I've heard feedback that really appreciated what both of you did in that space. So it's important that I don't undersell it on your behalf, so I'm not doing. So that was the first thing. The other thing, you and I have just met, haven't we? And one thing that is actually going to come back to the board, and I think the voice of the staff networks is key in this. I asked you to go away and you came back to me on this. Spoiler alert, we will be coming back on this at some point in the future. What's the one thing that the networks would like us to do that would make a difference? Because part of the next stage of our journey is connecting to those networks and saying, you said this and we did it. And I think, I know you've done that work, it's too early to talk about it in public, but I just wanted to say, as part of our ongoing journey, thank you for doing that. And I look forward to being able to talk to board and also bring the network chairs back into this room. We talked about that too, didn't we? Because it shouldn't just be channeled through you, it should be them speaking to us directly about what they think is important. because that's the way of creating a psychologically safe space. They feel they could come into this room and their voice is being heard on an equal basis, and we're having that conversation with them. So thank you for the work that you do. That's all.
Thanks, Simon, for that. Can I just conclude? We'd like to spend a lot more time talking about this, but inevitably, we only have limited. But I would echo what Simon has said. 100% support for this. Can I give one challenge? My experience of other organisations, and I'm sure my NED colleagues will have this as well. You can make slow but steady change. You need that in any organisation. That is really, really important. But also, occasionally, you need something that is not big bang, but different, takes people out of their comfort zone. And I would say about CCAM, I think we're too much in our comfort zone. I think from time to time, we recruit people into this organisation that we're all very similar. And the biggest experience I had in my executive career was when I began to get people coming into the organisation who were different to me and would challenge my expectations and my thinking. I think we've got some way to go on our recruitment. We talked about this, Caroline, and this sort of thing. I find it a bit strange. You might tell me I've got this wrong. There seems to be very little outreach here to the communities that we serve. I put that challenge out to community first responders as well. To what extent are we getting people from those underserved communities who are interested in coming towards CCAM? And I would really encourage outreach, going out to schools. In my organisation, we had people come in for 6 weeks during the school holidays, just to get a bit of a flavour of what it was like, and that we were a safe organisation to it. So I would encourage you. I know we've got limited resources, and all of this takes time, but it is really important, because I think, ask the question, what do you want CCAM to look like in terms of the composition of its people now, 5 years and 10 years into the future? And I think, Caroline, we're in the same space on that. We've talked about it quite extensively. But thank you very much for the work that you're doing, and look forward to the next development day in July. But know that you have our support in that space. Thank you very much indeed. I am conscious of time. We will finish at 1 because I know executive colleagues have got to go to a presentation. But you're going to briefly, no, Margaret, sorry, Edie, it's freedom to speak up.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just introduce as Kim comes to the table. For the sake of those that have joined the board, I just want to remind them the responsibilities and purpose of Freedom to Speak Up. So the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, and we have Kim as the Guardian and Lorraine and Charlotte as our deputies, is designed to encourage staff to raise concerns about patient safety, quality of care, or any other issues they're uncomfortable discussing through standard channels. It's a very important control tool for us. These Guardians provide an independent, confidential avenue. And I stress that, and this is an avenue for staff to speak up so that concerns are heard, investigated and addressed. There are some key aspects, there's 4 key aspects to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian: independent and confidential, focus on patient safety and quality, support and feedback, and encouraging the culture of speaking up. The one I just want to focus on is that independent and confidential. They're not part of the management structure. It's important that people recognise that. So they're almost an arm's length body within the body, and they do provide a safe space for staff to raise concerns without fear of reprisal. So with that background, I'll hand over to Kim.
Thank you, Margaret. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. Thank you for inviting me back to present the Freedom to Speak update. I'd like to start by reflecting on what continues to be an encouraging direction of travel for our organisation. Over the past year, we've seen indicators of positive cultural change. One of the most promising developments has been the increase in concerns closed with a satisfactory outcome, which has risen by just over 9% year on year. This may suggest that staff are not only willing to speak up, but are beginning to trust that their concerns will be handled appropriately. The latest National Staff Survey results reinforce this picture. CCAM has sustained improvements across all key Freedom to Speak Up indicators. We now rank 2nd nationally for year-on-year improvement amongst Ambulance Trust, with a 4% increase overall, following on from being the previous year's most improved trust in the country for Speak Up indicators. That's something that we should be proud of. We've seen a 70% reduction in cases where staff reported experiencing detriment as a result of speaking up, and this may suggest an improvement in psychological safety and trust in the organisation's response. However, it's important to acknowledge that we've also seen a significant increase in anonymous reporting over the same period. Our ongoing work with partnership universities has been particularly well received, and we're pleased to share that Surrey University has invited our FTSE team to contribute to clinical simulations, integrating speak-up scenarios into paramedic training. This means students are not only assessed on clinical skills, but also on their ability to raise concerns, and this is a valuable step in embedding a speak-up culture early in their careers. As previously mentioned, we've seen a rise in anonymous reporting. On the surface, this might seem at odds with the staff survey data, suggesting growing confidence. But if we look more closely, we can see a large spike during Speak Up Month, particularly from our Emergency Operations Centre. And this highlights both the impact of our awareness campaigns and the importance of local culture. EOC does remain the largest source of concerns. When standardised for workforce size, the rate of concerns in EOC is almost double the organisational average. In response, Freedom Speak Up has commissioned an OD listening event, and CCAM also launched a quality improvement initiative, and this is supported by senior leadership and the Deputy Chief Nurse. This will remain a key area of focus moving forward. We've seen an increase in concerns relating to interpersonal relationships and behaviours, and this suggests more staff are experiencing or at least feeling able to report issues such as incivility, communication breakdowns or bullying. At the same time, concerns linked to worker safety and wellbeing have increased, and system process concerns, particularly around HR and formal processes, have doubled. While these figures are concerning, they also represent opportunities. Staff are telling us what needs to change, and that is invaluable. In summary then, I believe the increase in case numbers, together with the improving outcomes and sustained staff confidence, reflect a growing understanding across CCAM that speaking up is not a threat. It's a route to learning, improvement and better care. As a board, I would ask that you continue your visible support of speaking up and encourage senior leaders to see concerns not as challenges to authority, but as opportunities for growth. Thank you.
Kim, thank you very much. That's very clear. I should also say thank you. Other colleagues may not be aware, but you ran a successful event on Monday, didn't you, for an hour for ambulance chairs, so we could share good practice on Freedom Speak Up. So thank you for doing that as well. Can I ask, firstly, turn to Richard? I'll come into you in a minute, but could I ask Subo as Freedom Speak Up Ned, anything you want to add to that? Do you agree with that? I know you said you've got some concerns, so please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kim, for that report as well. I mean, there are some really nice positives in there, and I think we congratulated ourselves, didn't we, last year when we came out as the most improved trust. I think that's absolutely terrific, and really good to see that there are more positive outcomes and more learning reviews as well, because we've been banging that drum for quite some time, so that's really positive. I'm also really pleased to see the decrease in detriment when they do speak up. I think that's really important. So well done on all of those things. I do remain concerned about the 460% increase in relationship and behaviours theme. That really is worrying. And the increase then in anonymous concerns as well. That doesn't suggest that we have a psychologically safe space for people to speak up. And disappointing once again to see EOC, and it's a perennial theme. My only comment on that, rather than a question, we have to do something different in the EOC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll come back to those points, but Richard, sorry, I stopped you, but please.
Thanks, Chair. My question was actually going to be exactly what Subo's just mentioned. We've had repeated reports come into board. Firstly, to say thank you for an excellent report, and it's really good to see that the positive indicators that are changing. This question probably isn't really aimed at you, it's probably aimed at the rest of the board, but repeated reports showing that EOC is an area of concern for us, and we keep saying that we're putting in actions to address the speaking up issues from EOC, but we keep bringing back reports saying it's still reporting higher than the rest of the trust, and we're just not cracking it. I just wondered whether we need to approach this issue differently, because whatever actions we're putting in place don't seem yet to be making the difference that we need. Again, that's not aimed at you. I know you're not responsible for that, but perhaps something for the rest of the board to consider for the future.
Thank you, and thank you, Kim, and Suba and Richard for that challenge to us all, because we all have to ask what each one of us is doing in that space, don't we? Because we've all been talking about it for quite a while. So if I can just point out a number of things that are happening. So first of all, we do have confidence in the leadership team there. We have a strong leadership team that have been together a long time. We have seen patterns of behaviour and outcomes, though, that have remained consistent, certainly over the 3 years I've been here. So there are some edges to the structure of the team itself, to the outputs that need addressing. And the way we're working really in close collaboration with the leadership team, and it's really important that we do that. This is where 40% of our business sits. It's the very intense end of our business. It's got the youngest generation of people, as well as some of the oldest generation of people. We've got people that work there for 20 years. We've got people there that are only for 4 months and they go again. So the uniqueness of it can't be underestimated in the impact that has on the culture and the continuation of ways of working, because the system is driving them to work in that way. So to shift it, it's really important that we do that in close collaboration together and with confidence that together we can do it. So the listening events are really very important. We're doing that in a number of different ways, including myself. I'm doing my 4th one on Saturday morning here at Crawley. It's also important to listen to the staff. So I hear from people at Crawley, so I'm putting out a challenge to all of us, is that this is the site where most of us come and go, yet they rarely see us, they don't know us. So I think there are things that we ourselves can do to enter through those doors and make sure that we're seen, we're noticed, they understand where our values and principles lie. So that's just a throughout to us, really, to the middle of the room. Alongside that, there is a very constructive focus group taking place under the leadership of Joe Turner, so my deputy, where triangulation of lots of sources of data, including the work we did following a staff survey, Janine, with a number of executives, is being not only worked through but also addressed. So the confidence is that there will be progress in this over the months and over the years. It will take a while, but the doors are opening, and that's been the important bit. We're entering it in with respect and with sensitivity and with the understanding that this is a really difficult area of work and we need to treat it well because it's the front door of our patients. There's work going on with the clinical audit, the approach to that. So there's a separate QI piece going on around clinical audit. It's been used in the past as a measure of failure, and it's delivered in a way that people feel bad rather than learning and being developed and being supported. So there's work being undertaken in there as well as in the wider issues. So it will take a lot, and I do ask each one of us to think about our own contribution to that. The structure of the new teams, including quality lead and clinical lead, and the wraparound we're putting into those divisional teams now in organisational development-wise, which you referenced earlier, Suba, is going to be quite important because they'll be expected to grow and develop together in the same way as we're going to expect the other teams to grow and develop together. That gives us further opportunities to start setting out, instilling the expectations and then working with consequences if those expectations aren't met.
Okay, Margaret, thank you very much. In the interest of time, I was just going to not, if that was okay, thank you very much indeed. That was a really good response. Actually, I'm conscious that I don't go in and talk to, I'm in the building quite a lot, so that's a good challenge, so thank you for that. I'm conscious of time. I thought that was a good response, Margaret. I'd like to know 3 or 4 months down track whether that's having an impact, and Kim, perhaps you can closely align on that. The point about anonymised, speaking, I'd like to see if that is a real statistical trend, or as you say, is just arising from a particular event. So perhaps when you've got more data, you can, I'd like to record it as an action for this board to get a bit more assurance around that, and perhaps Peter, you can liaise on that point. And Max, the behavioural aspect, that may be part of a journey that we're on, where we're improving our management and people are getting yeah, but we need to get to the group what that is. But I think it's appropriate that your committee focuses on that with Subo's support in that space. But that's all I wanted to say at this point. But then, Simon, please.
Two things. The first is, as ever, just on behalf of us all to thank Kim. I think we should note that, you know, it's not for nothing that Kim's been invited to talk to the ACE chairs, and it reflects her standing amongst the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians. So I just wanted to say congratulations on that, and that's not from nothing. You've got to that place, and so well done. The second is to address our colleagues at the back. So the reason for having a shadow board is that we help to get to hear different voices. And so I'm just going to leave you with a thought. How do you help us in this journey? Because if we're going to get this, if we're going to change this, it needs all of us, and that includes you as shadow board members, to help us think about this differently. Because you'll have access to different conversations and yourselves hear different voices. So it's an inclusive moment of saying, help us on this journey too. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That's good. So, Kim, we'll conclude that. We'll obviously continue to have close contact with you to make sure that we are listening, and that's the most important thing. But thank you for what you're doing. Sharing this very well. We've got two remaining items: one on quality, and then one on sustainable partner working. On quality, I don't apologise that we haven't focused as much as we normally would, because we had the last board 4 weeks ago. There hasn't been a quality committee, and all the figures look broadly reasonable where we are. But could I ask the quality executive, patient Margaret and Jackie and Jen, just are there any issues there? And then I'd welcome the views of Karen and Liz and Mojcan if there's anything that's bothering them at this particular point in time. So, Jackie, do you want to say?
Sure, thank you. I think, as Margaret mentioned earlier, the majority of the metrics are looking quite strong and stable. We have noted some declines in some clinical audit compliance. There is a plan in place which is outlined in the report to deal with that. I would like to celebrate 28 patients survived an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest in December. It would be wrong of me not to draw that out. I should point out we are seeing a run of around about 10% over the sort of the winter period. We know that's below our target period. However, this is consistent with the national trend, so I'm not expecting that to be as a result of any care delivery problems, but nonetheless the cardiac arrest outcome improvement group are looking at it to make sure that no stone is unturned in identifying actionable improvement opportunities. Things like our Utstein survival rate, which is a specific group of patients that are more likely to have a reversible cardiac arrest, are still excellent, 36.4%, and we're doing well in things like our heart attack STEMI care bundle delivery compliance as well, which is an important indicator for improving outcomes. I would also like to just highlight and celebrate that our PGD training compliance is in a really, really good position, and that's becoming stable now. That's sort of absolutely hardwired into how we approve use of patient group direction, so that is a step in the right direction. And just finally, also just highlights the improvements that have been made in relation to infection prevention and control as part of the Make Ready process, again, which is highlighted in the report. I don't know if Richard or Margaret would like to add anything.
Sorry, Richard, I didn't mean to exclude you. Is there anything you'd like to add on? Are you
just to highlight that at the last board members raised concerns about the medicines audits at stations, which is now corrected to normal levels. So there's no further problem with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And Margaret, please.
Yeah, and then finally for me, you'll see a lot of performance metrics in the IQR we have. So we've been doing some additional work, which is putting alongside some of those metrics the harm events that we know about. And as we know from some BI intelligence work that was done a number of years ago, there's a direct correlation with delays and the severity and the number of harm events. So we've been able to see, because we are delivering and our delays have remained good in response compared to the rest of the country, but we've seen no changes in the harm rates or events or incidents that are occurring. And a direct correlation, there was 1 month where it spiked up the time that people were waiting, and so did the harm events then 2 or 3 weeks later. It's back down again. So that's interesting validation for us, but on the whole, we've seen nothing of significance or concern in the patient safety side.
Okay, thank you, all of you. And Liz and Karen and Monica, any concerns that you've got as our quality next?
I don't think there's any concerns. I think it's our first view of the new IQR. So I appreciate Jen saying this is work in progress. I think we do need to take it back to the committees to interrogate the data so that we can then come back and give the board full assurance around those data metrics, because there are some additions, there are some changes, and I think we need to be very comfortable and assured around that reporting. But it's great to see the improvements made to the IQR.
Okay, thank you very much. And can I just say, I was late to do this, but I did actually visit the Ashford Hub and was very impressed by what was going on there. And I've had independent feedback from the Sussex ICB chair, who was saying how good it was. And he said that in Sussex, you prevented 300 inappropriate referrals. And he just was saying, why couldn't it be 3,000? And have they got that many? I don't know. But anyway, that's the challenge, which is legitimate. Why can't we scale up? Anyway, I'll leave on that one. But thank you for all that's been done in that space. Finance, last but not least, 2 things for me, really, Simon, rather than going into the detail of your report, which is excellent. It's assurance around where we are. We're only, 3 months into the financial year, what the trajectory looks like, and confidence that you will meet the requirement for the statutory accounts and annual report.
Did you want to go to Paul first in terms of the finance?
I'm sorry, yes, I should have done it. I'm jumping ahead. But Paul, you heard my questions. Those are what I was interested in.
We'll be quick.
Sorry.
Okay, so we met last week and we were assured on 2 points, which are really important. The first one was about financial performance for this year, and we're well on track. And the next one was about efficiencies. And again, we're well on track. I'm very impressed with the work the team have done to already identify the efficiencies required for this year. Right, we've already 4 million efficiency savings have already been identified, which is brilliant. The other area which we're assured on is operational performance, where we've had good call answering performance, good focus on improving CT mean and hear and treat rates, and collaboration with SCAS. But there were a couple of areas where we need to do a little bit more of a deep dive. And one of those was around referral rates. We've got good UCR volumes going up. Referral rates haven't, though. So that's one area to look at. And then the other one was about falls. And we were treated to a lot of benchmarking information, which we were very excited about. We had a preview of the new IQR, which we're very excited about. It did beg a lot of questions. So it is still work in progress, but definitely heading in the right direction. A couple of areas where the committee looked at and were on alert. One is the financial plan for the whole year, because it's a very challenged system. Even though our team have done brilliantly, the rest of our partners, and there's lots of focus on that. So we need to keep coming back to that. And even though we've highlighted 9 billion of savings, we haven't validated all of them out of the 10 required. We're going to keep bringing that back as well. Another area which we put on alert was about risks, because the board, across the whole trust, there's 123 active risks, 24 in the thick area. We thought that's quite a large number, and they didn't all seem to be equal. So some seem more material than others, but so we want to have another look at that to say, actually, can we balance them out? And it's 123. Hopefully less is what we're looking at. And then the other was digital performance. We're delighted that Nick's joined. It's fair to say he's got a lot on his plate. We're going to get him a cold wet towel for his head because he's got such a large topic area. And he's going to bring back a plan for how to implement the digital strategy and make improvements in early August. So that was obviously going to come back as well. The final areas where we're advised, we're making good progress, but we're going to keep an eye on things. Now it's fleet performance, where there's still issues, even though they've improved on recruitment. We've got 97 new DCAs arriving, which is very exciting. We've signed a really good contract with the Poles to actually renovate them, which is very innovative. So lots of moving parts there. We're going to keep an eye on that. So that'll be coming back. But we're very pleased with progress. The other one was procurement, where a lot of the laws have changed. Our team are well on top of it, but they're developing a strategy. So again, we want to see how that goes, and that's going to come back as well. And the only final area was on commission contracts. Again, very comprehensive. Every contract was covered, but there's a midwifery in particular that has been a bit slow. So it's very important to all these contracts, because that's where a lot of money is spent. That's going to come back as well.
Okay.
That's the summary for what we're going
That's very comprehensive, so thank you very much for that. There's a hint here, unless there's something you really fundamentally want to add, I am happy to just take Paul's report there, and that's not to take away the importance of finance, as you will know.
Indeed.
My view on that.
No, I think just to add the context nationally, obviously the economic outlook continues to be very challenging. We've got CSR next week. Our focus on cost efficiency and productivity will need to continue for the foreseeable future, and therefore our systems and processes of control need to improve to reflect that in order for us to sustain this meaningfully over time. Important because using our resources economically and effectively means we can maximise our service to the public, to the population as a whole. Wasting money doesn't help our population. So that's important, but that will be coming down, increasing pressure from the national team that we are, as a board, scrutinising our cost improvement, our productivity plans, and we are assured that if we've got any risks, they are being de-risked, to coin the phrase, as quickly as we can. So just to bring to the board's attention, we have complete programmes to underpin our cost improvements and our productivity. That said, I think we need further work around pipeline and also downside mitigations. This is something that we talked about yesterday, so I think that's just a hint, something for the board to be thinking about in due course. And then to pick up your question, Michael, on the accounts, we're pretty much there or thereabouts with the external auditors. We've got a final wash-up meeting with them next week, then week after next actually, then we'll do audit committee, but I expect there to be a much more positive outcome than last year, both in terms of the internal controls we've put in place, but also in terms of value for money. So I think there's some good news that will be coming to audit committee, but I won't say too much more at this point.
Okay, that's very helpful, and I really do take the point you make about the national position on NHS funding. As Simon has said, at the next public board in August, we're going to focus much more on efficiency, productivity, and our financial position. So I think that's a really good opportunity before we get to mid-year to really drill down into that space. I'm interested in the comment, Paul, that you made about risk. Again, because we only had the last board, we haven't had an audit committee, but could I ask chairs with Howard to look at the risk register so that when we come back to the next board, we're confident around, trust the executive, but it's really, are we really focusing on the right strategic risks going forward? But when you think in terms of risk to patient care, from what I've heard, I am assured, and in terms of supporting our people, I hope what people have heard today is that we are moving in the right direction. That's not to, in any way, not think we've got a lot more to do, but I think we have a plan and we have the willingness and commitment to make it different. And we're already beginning to see that change, so I'm really encouraged by that. And we'll talk about digital again in August. I will formally close this meeting. I think I've almost got it dead on the spot. So the meeting is finished. I hope everybody had their opportunity to speak. Please tell me if you didn't. Questions from the public? We haven't got questions,
No,
have we?
no, nothing's come through now.
Nothing's come through. Okay, thank you both executive and non-executive. Make my job a lot easier. And thank you for the Shadow Board. Please give us feedback if you've got anything to tell us. Thank you very much.
And back at 1:30 for the board.
Yeah,
part two.
1:30 for part 2, which hopefully won't take an hour. So thank you very much.
Sorry, running.
No, it's all right.